The cold of the marble floor was the first thing I felt, a brutal shock that shot up my spine. One moment, I was the matriarch of the Ellison family, sitting at the head of my own Christmas dinner table. The next, I was on the ground, my 72-year-old body aching from the impact, looking up at the cruel face of my own son. His voice echoed in the sudden, deathly silence of the room. "This place belongs to my mother-in-law. Get out. N-double-E." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. Just an hour before, the scene had been something out of a magazine. The Ellison Ranch in Dallas, our family's heart for over 40 years, was dressed in its holiday best. A magnificent pine tree, so tall its angel topper nearly brushed the vaulted wooden ceiling, glittered with a lifetime of ornaments. The fireplace crackled, casting a warm, golden glow on the faces of my family. The air smelled of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and pine, the scent of Christmas, the scent of home. I had spent the entire week preparing. My hands, though wrinkled, still knew their way around a kitchen, and my heart found joy in creating this perfect day for the people I loved most. My grandchildren, Emily and Jacob, had helped me decorate. Emily, at 16, was whip-smart and sensitive, with my late husband Frank's thoughtful eyes. Jacob, at 13, was all heart, a bundle of pure, uncomplicated affection. They were my world. My son, David, arrived with his wife, Monica, and her mother, Helen. I greeted them all with hugs, though Monica's was stiff, her cheek cold against mine. Helen, as always, was impeccably dressed, a picture of serene elegance, but her eyes, when they met mine, held a glint I could never quite decipher. It was a polite, smiling coldness. We gathered in the grand dining room. The long mahogany table was set with our finest china and silver, glowing under the soft light of a dozen candles. I moved to my customary seat at the head of the table, the place I had occupied beside my husband for 4 decades. It was more than a chair. It was a symbol of my place in this family, this home that Frank and I had built from nothing. As I was about to sit, David stepped forward. His face was pale, his jaw tight. "Mother," he said, his voice strained. Monica stood just behind him, her hand on his arm, a silent commander. Helen had already seated herself in the chair to the right of the head, watching the scene unfold with an unnerving calm. "Yes, David?" I smiled, though a knot of unease was tightening in my stomach. He cleared his throat. "That seat, Helen will be sitting there tonight." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "What are you talking about? Helen's seat is right there. This has always been my seat." I let out a small laugh, trying to brush away the absurdity of it. "Don't be silly, dear. Let's not be difficult on Christmas." "I'm not being difficult," he snapped, his voice rising. Monica's fingers tightened on his arm, a subtle squeeze of encouragement. "Things are changing. Helen is the senior woman here now. This place belongs to her." The words hit me like stones. The senior woman? I looked at Helen. She offered a small, sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. The air crackled with tension. The staff, who had been quietly serving drinks, froze in place. My breath caught in my throat. I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I had raised, and saw a stranger. "David," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "This is my home. You know what this chair represents." "It represents the past," he cut me off, his frustration boiling over into rage. "You're stuck in the past, Mother. It's time for new leadership in this family, in this company. It's my house now. It is not your house until I am dead," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, filled with a sudden, cold fury. That was when he did it. He didn't just ask again. He didn't argue. He lost all patience. He placed his hand flat on my shoulder and pushed. It wasn't a gentle nudge. It was a hard, deliberate shove, fueled by years of resentment I never knew existed. For a 72-year-old woman, it doesn't take much to lose your balance. I stumbled backward, my heel catching on the leg of the chair. Time seemed to slow down. I saw Emily's wide, horrified eyes from across the table. I saw Jacob's mouth open in a silent scream. I saw Monica's lips curl into a faint, triumphant smirk. Then, impact. My hip struck the marble floor with a sickening thud. The sharp, blinding pain was immediate, But the emotional shock was worse. My wine glass, which I'd still been holding, flew from my hand and shattered against the floor, the sound as sharp and violent as a gunshot. A deathly silence fell over the room. It was broken by my grandson. "Grandma!" Jacob screamed, jumping up from his chair to run to me. But my eyes were locked on a small, blinking red light in the corner of the room. Emily, my beautiful, sensitive Emily, had been holding her new phone, intending to capture a video of our family's happy Christmas dinner. Her hand was shaking, but the lens was pointed directly at the scene. It had recorded everything: my son's cruel words, his violent push, my humiliating fall, the broken glass spreading like tears around me. I saw it all reflected in her phone's dark screen: the face of a heartbroken old woman on the floor, the victorious smiles of my daughter-in-law and her mother, and the face of the son I no longer recognized, standing over me without a shred of remorse. The war had begun, and they had just handed me my first and most powerful weapon. A betrayal of that magnitude doesn't happen in a single, explosive moment. It's a cancer that grows in the dark, fed by whispers and secret resentments. Looking back, I can see the signs were all there, like faint cracks in a foundation. I just didn't want to see them. The week before Christmas, while my heart was full of nothing but love for my family, the plot against me was already in motion. I remember that week so clearly. The Dallas air was crisp and cool, a welcome break from the usual Texas heat. The city was aglow with festive lights, and I felt a genuine sense of peace. Frank had been gone for 2 years, and the holidays were still tinged with sadness. But my grandchildren, Emily and Jacob, were a powerful antidote to grief. Their excitement was contagious. I spent an entire afternoon at Neiman Marcus, searching for the perfect gifts. For Emily, I found a beautiful first-edition copy of her favorite classic novel, bound in dark green leather. She had my husband's love for books, a quiet intelligence that saw the world with an artist's sensitivity. I knew she would treasure it. For Jacob, it was easier. He was all boy, full of energy and a love for the outdoors. I bought him the new mountain bike he'd been circling in catalogs for months, a gleaming machine of chrome and black. I pictured his face on Christmas morning and smiled to myself in the middle of the bustling store. I was so wrapped up in my joyful preparations, so blissfully unaware. I imagined them all at the ranch, opening their presents, the fire roaring, our family safe and happy in the home Frank and I had built. I saw David, my son, smiling as he watched his children. In my mind, he was still the boy who used to run to me with scraped knees, the young man who had looked at me with such pride at his college graduation. I was living in a past that, I now realize, no longer existed. While I was choosing wrapping paper, my son was sitting in a dark, expensive restaurant downtown, selling his birthright for a bowl of soup. I can picture the scene now as if I were a fly on the wall. The restaurant would have been one of Monica's choices, all sharp angles, gleaming chrome, and hushed, self-important tones. It was the kind of place where deals were made. A cold and sterile environment for a cold and sterile conversation. The 3 of them were there: David, my son, Monica, his ambitious wife, and Helen, her mother, the serpent in our garden. They would have ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Helen would have guided the conversation, as she always did, with the practiced skill of a master puppeteer. She never raised her voice. She never appeared angry. She simply planted seeds of poison with a gentle, concerned smile. "David, darling," I can hear her saying, her voice smooth as silk. "You know how much I admire your mother. Margaret is one of the strongest women I've ever known." She would have paused, letting the compliment land, disarming him. "But," she would continue, her tone shifting to one of deep, feigned concern, "the world of construction, of business. It isn't the same one she and Frank conquered. It's faster now, more ruthless. Her ideas, while well-intentioned, are outdated." David would have shifted uncomfortably in his seat. A part of him, the boy I raised, would have wanted to defend me. "Mother knows what she's doing. She helped Dad build Ellison Construction from the ground up." That's when Monica would have jumped in, playing her part perfectly. "Of course she did, honey," she'd say, placing her hand on his. "No one is denying that. But that was then. This is now. We just had a board meeting where she tried to earmark $1 million for a new local arts program. $1 million. We have competitors trying to undercut us on the Bridgeport contract, and she wants to fund a ballet. Helen would have nodded gravely. It's not about the money, David. It's about focus. Your mother still sees the company as a family project, a way to do good in the community. That's lovely, but it's a liability in this day and age. You see the bigger picture. You have your father's head for business, but you're being held back. She knew exactly which buttons to push. His entire life, David had struggled under the weight of his father's legacy. Frank was a giant of a man, not just in stature, but in character and accomplishment. David, who was not as driven and not as brilliant, had always felt like he was living in his father's shadow. Helen's words were designed to hit him where it hurt the most. His insecurity, his desperate need to prove that he was his own man. She needs to understand that her time of running things is over, Helen would have said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. It's your time now. You have to be strong, David. Not for you, but for your own family, for Monica, for your children's future. She's right, Monica would chime in, her eyes hard. We need to have complete control, David, full authority to make the tough decisions without having to run them by her for approval. It's time we took what is rightfully ours. The hesitation I imagine in my son's eyes is the most painful part. There must have been a moment, a flicker of a second, where his love and loyalty to me fought against the poison they were pouring into his ears. But it wasn't a fair fight. On one side was his mother, who he saw as a relic of the past. On the other were these two women, stroking his ego, promising him the power and respect he craved. He looked at Helen's serene, smiling face. He looked at his wife's determined, hungry expression. They were offering him a crown. All he had to do was betray his own mother. I can see him picking up his wine glass, his knuckles white as he gripped the stem. He stared into the deep red liquid for a long moment. Then he took a slow drink, placed the glass back on the table with a soft click, and gave a single, sharp nod. A silent agreement had been forged in the dim light of that soulless restaurant. The ambush was set, and I, miles away, was happily paying for a bicycle, completely oblivious to the fact that my own son had just agreed to push me out of my home, my company, and my life. A few days before the Christmas Eve storm broke, there was a quiet dinner, a false peace. It was just the four of us, myself, David, and the children. Monica was conveniently away at a spa weekend with her mother, a trip I now see was likely a final strategy session. At the time, I was just relieved to have my son and grandchildren to myself. I thought it was an opportunity to connect, to bridge the strange new distance I'd been feeling between us. I was a fool. I cooked David's favorite meal. Pot roast, slow simmered for hours until it was tender enough to fall apart with a fork, with creamy mashed potatoes and glazed carrots. It was the taste of his childhood, a meal I hoped would remind him of simpler, happier times. We sat at the smaller round table in the breakfast nook, a cozy space that looked out over the sprawling ranch lands as the Texas sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. For a little while, it felt normal. Jacob chattered excitedly about his school's basketball team, and Emily spoke quietly but passionately about a new photography project. I watched David listen to his children, a soft smile on his face, and my heart ached with love. I saw a glimpse of the man he was supposed to be, the man I had raised. That glimpse gave me the courage to bring up a subject that was dear to my heart. David, I began, waiting for a lull in the conversation. I had the most wonderful meeting today with the folks from the Children's Music Foundation. His smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Oh? I pressed on, my enthusiasm making me blind to the warning sign. They're doing incredible work, providing instruments and free lessons to children in underserved communities right here in Dallas. Their current building is practically falling down, and they're trying to raise funds for a new facility. I was thinking, Ellison Construction could be the lead donor. We could fund the entire performance hall. Imagine it, darling, the Frank Ellison Performance Hall. It would be such a beautiful way to honor your father's memory. I looked at him, my eyes shining with the vision of it. Frank had been a quiet philanthropist. He believed that the wealth we created, came with a responsibility to the community that helped us thrive. This project felt like a continuation of his very soul. David put his fork down with a soft clink against the china. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the suddenly quiet room. He took a slow sip of water, his eyes cold and unreadable. "Mother," he said, his voice flat and devoid of any warmth, "the company is not your personal charity fund." The words were so blunt, so dismissive, they felt like a physical slap. I stared at him, my smile faltering. I don't understand. It's a tax write-off, of course, and the PR would be wonderful. But more than that, it's the right thing to do. It's what your father would have wanted. I'm not interested in what Dad would have wanted, he said, a sharp, cruel edge to his voice. I'm interested in profit margins and shareholder value. We're in the middle of a bidding war for the new airport expansion. Every dollar counts. We are not a foundation, we are a construction empire, and I would appreciate it if you would let me run it as such. The air went thick with unspoken things. Jacob looked down at his plate, his cheerful energy completely extinguished. Across the table, Emily's eyes darted from her father's hard face to my stunned one. I could see the worry clouding her features. She felt the chill as keenly as I did. She knew, in that instant, that this wasn't a simple business disagreement. It was a power play. I tried to recover, to smooth over the ugly rift that had just torn through our meal. I forced a laugh, but it sounded brittle and hollow even to my own ears. "Of course, dear. You're the CEO. I was just making a suggestion." "Then please, keep your suggestions to yourself," he said, picking up his fork again as if nothing had happened. "I'll handle the business decisions from now on." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream at him, to remind him that I wasn't just some board member. I was his mother, the co-founder of the very company he was so arrogantly claiming as his own. I had poured my own blood, sweat, and tears into Ellison Construction. My business acumen had saved Frank from ruin more than once, a fact we had always kept between us to protect his pride. But I looked at the children, at their troubled faces, and I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I just nodded. "All right, David." The rest of the dinner was an exercise in agony. We talked about the weather, about school, about anything and everything except the elephant that was now sitting at the table with us. But the pot roast tasted like ash in my mouth. The warmth of the room had evaporated, replaced by an icy cold that had nothing to do with the winter evening outside. As I looked at my son, I saw the full extent of Helen and Monica's influence. His words weren't his own. They were echoes of their cold, calculating ambition. He was wearing his father's suit, sitting in his father's chair, but he was a stranger to me. The loving boy I knew, the one who respected and admired his parents, was gone. In his place was this hard, resentful man who looked at me not with love, but with impatience, as if I were an obstacle in his path. That night, for the first time, I truly understood. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't a simple case of my son wanting to find his own way. A chasm had opened up between us, deep and wide, and perhaps impossible to cross. He wasn't just trying to run a company. He was trying to erase me from it. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the quiet dinner was just the first tremor before the earthquake. The drive from the ranch to Charles Bennett's office was a blur. The familiar Dallas skyline, usually a symbol of the empire Frank and I had built, seemed alien and hostile. Every glittering skyscraper felt like a monument to the corporate ruthlessness that had infected my son. My hip throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, but it was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. Charles Bennett had been my husband's lawyer, his best friend since they were boys, and the executor of his will. His office was an oasis of timeless dignity in a city obsessed with the new. It was paneled in dark mahogany, lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, filled with leather-bound legal tomes, and smelled faintly of old paper and good whiskey. It was a place of secrets and trust. He met me at the door, his usually cheerful face etched with grave concern. At 74, Charles was still sharp as a tack, with wise, kind eyes that had seen it all. He took one look at my face and simply said, "In here, Margaret. Let me pour you a brandy." I didn't protest. I sank into one of the deep leather armchairs facing his massive desk as he handed me a heavy crystal glass. The fiery liquid did little to warm the ice in my veins. He pushed me. "Charles, I said, my voice a hollow whisper. I recounted the whole sordid affair, the demand for my chair, David's cold words, the shove, the fall in front of my grandchildren. I spoke without tears, my shock having burned away everything but a cold, hard knot of grief. Charles listened without interruption, his hands steepled under his chin. He didn't seem surprised, which was somehow the most damning thing of all. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. "Frank saw this coming," he said finally, his voice heavy. He prayed it would never happen, but he knew it might. He knew David's weakness. "What are you talking about?" Instead of answering, Charles rose and walked to a large oil painting of a Texas landscape that hung on the far wall. He swung it aside, revealing the dark steel door of a walk-in safe. He spun the combination dial with practiced clicks and pulled the heavy door open. From a private lockbox inside, he withdrew a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with the familiar Ellison family crest in dark red wax. My husband's seal. He placed it on the desk between us. Frank added a special provision to his final directives, separate from the main will. He called it his poison pill clause. My hand trembled as I reached for the envelope. A poison pill? That's a corporate term, a defense against a hostile takeover. Precisely, Charles said, his eyes meeting mine. And Frank saw exactly what was coming, a hostile takeover of his family. He knew David was susceptible to influence, especially from Monica and her mother. He saw their ambition. "So, he left you a weapon of last resort." Charles leaned forward, his voice low and serious. "The clause states that if David, as CEO and majority shareholder, subjects you to provable and irrefutable public humiliation, you are granted the immediate right to purchase his entire controlling stake in Ellison Construction, all of it for the symbolic sum of $1 dollar. I stared at him, the air leaving my lungs. The audacity of it, the sheer strategic brilliance, was pure Frank. It was a master chess move from beyond the grave. But the implication was monstrous. He wanted me to bankrupt my own son? No, Charles corrected gently. He wanted to give you a choice. He wanted to ensure that you would never be at the mercy of David's weakness or Monica's greed. He was giving you a loaded gun, Margaret, and trusting that you would only ever use it if they backed you into a corner so tight you had no other way out. A loaded gun. The weight of it settled on me, heavy and cold. For a moment, I recoiled. To pull that trigger would be to declare total war, to destroy what was left of my family. It was unthinkable. Then Charles asked the question that changed everything. It's an explosive legal maneuver, and they would fight it tooth and nail. The entire case would hinge on one thing, the proof. The humiliation can't be just your word against his. It has to be absolute, undeniable, something a judge could look at and have no doubt. "Do you have proof, Margaret?" My mind, which had been a whirlwind of pain and confusion, suddenly went still and silent. The image that flashed behind my eyes was as clear as a photograph. The small, blinking red light of Emily's phone, the screen capturing the entire, horrific scene. My son's face twisted in anger, his hand on my shoulder, my body falling, the shatter of the glass, the triumphant smirk on Monica's face. It wasn't just proof, it was a verdict. I looked at Charles, and I felt the last of my hesitation burn away, replaced by something I hadn't felt in years, the cold, calculating fury of a woman who had just been handed the means to fight back. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My memory of that evening now plays back in fragments, each one sharp and clear, like shards of broken glass. But the moments just before the fall are what haunt me the most. That was when the battle lines were drawn, not with a cannon blast, but with a whisper and a smile. That was when the air in my own home turned to poison. I was standing near the fireplace, speaking with Jacob about his Christmas wish list, when Helen made her entrance. She didn't just walk in, she arrived. She was wearing a deep emerald green velvet dress that clung to her in a way that was both elegant and vaguely predatory. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, cold and brilliant. She moved through the room not as a guest, but as a queen taking possession of her court. I turned to greet her, a polite smile on my lips. "Helen, you look stunning. Merry Christmas." "Margaret, dear," she said, her voice a low purr. She air-kissed the space beside my cheek. "You've made the place look so festive. So traditional." There was a subtle emphasis on the last word, a hint of condescension that I chose to ignore. My unease began to grow when she didn't mingle. Instead, she glided directly to the dining room. I watched as she surveyed the magnificent table I had spent all afternoon setting. Then, with a quiet, deliberate grace, she placed her evening bag on the table, next to the chair to the right of the head, my husband's former seat, the seat of honor. And then she sat down, crossing her legs, the picture of serene entitlement. It was a blatant power play, and everyone in the room felt it. The serving staff, who were putting the final touches on the place settings, exchanged nervous glances. Even Jacob seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere, his cheerful chatter fading into silence. It was a declaration. She was no longer a guest. In her mind, she had already been promoted. I saw David and Monica standing near the entryway, their heads close together. They were a tight, conspiratorial unit. Monica had her hand locked on David's forearm, her crimson nails digging slightly into the fabric of his suit jacket. I couldn't hear her words, but I could read the intensity in her expression, the way her eyes bored into him. It was the look of a handler giving a final, urgent command to a prized animal before letting it off the leash. Later, piecing it all together, I could almost hear her whisper, her voice a venomous hiss in his ear. "It's time, David. The pleasantries are over. Are you going to be the man of this house? Or are you going to let her treat you like a little boy forever? Show her who's in charge now." I watched my son's face. I saw the conflict there, the flicker of doubt, the shadow of the boy who loved his mother. But it was fleeting. Under Monica's relentless pressure, his features hardened, his jaw set. He straightened his shoulders, pulling himself up to his full height, a pale imitation of his father's confident stance. He was steeling himself for what was to come. The writing was on the wall, in bold, cruel letters, and I had been too busy admiring the Christmas decorations to read it. The pressure from those two women was a physical force in the room. It was a vice, and my son was caught in the middle, being squeezed until his own character and conscience were crushed. Helen, with her silent, regal disapproval from the table, and Monica, with her sharp, whispered provocations, had become the puppet masters. David was about to dance on their strings. I decided to try and seize back control, to pretend this wasn't happening. I clapped my hands together, forcing a bright, cheerful tone into my voice. "All right, everyone. Shall we take our seats? The turkey is about to be carved." My voice cut through the thick tension, but it didn't dissipate it. The staff scurried to their positions. Emily and Jacob moved uncertainly toward their chairs. Monica gave David's arm one last, hard squeeze and then released him, a faint, knowing smirk on her lips. She had wound him up and set him loose. I turned and walked toward my chair at the head of the table, the one that had been mine for 40 years. Every step felt heavy, as if I were wading through water. Every eye was on me. The cheerful crackle of the fire in the hearth suddenly sounded deafening in the strained silence. This was it. This was the moment where the Cold War that had been brewing in my family was about to turn hot. As I reached for the back of my chair, I saw David move out of the corner of my eye. He wasn't walking to his own seat. He was walking directly toward me, his expression a mask of grim determination. The storm was no longer gathering. It had arrived. I don't remember getting up off the floor. I don't remember the hands that may or may not have helped me. My memory of leaving the dining room is a tunnel of roaring silence, the horrified faces of the staff and my grandchildren blurring into a meaningless watercolor of shock. The only thing I felt was the searing cold of the marble that had seeped into my bones and the even colder reality of what had just happened. My son. My own son had put his hands on me. I walked, not ran up the grand, curving staircase of my home. Each step sent a jolt of pain through my hip, a grim metronome marking my retreat. I kept my back straight, my head held high. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Not yet. I could feel their eyes on my back, a combination of shock, guilt, and I was certain cold-blooded satisfaction. My bedroom was my sanctuary, the one place in this sprawling house that was truly mine. It was decorated in soft creams and blues, filled with books and photographs of a life I thought I understood. I stepped inside, and the first thing I did was turn the heavy, ornate brass lock on the door. The loud, definitive click was the sound of a drawbridge being raised, a fortress wall being sealed. I was safe, for now. I leaned my back against the solid wood of the door and squeezed my eyes shut, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. The dam of composure I had so carefully constructed was about to break. A sob, hot and raw, clawed its way up my throat. This couldn't be real. It was a nightmare, a grotesque distortion of a Christmas dinner. Any moment now, I would wake up. But the throbbing in my hip was real. The shattered image of my son's face, twisted with a rage I'd never seen, was real. A soft, hesitant knock came at the door. "Go away," I choked out, my voice thick with unshed tears. "Grandma?" A small, trembling voice whispered through the wood. "It's me. Emily. Please." My heart fractured a little more. Emily, my sweet, sensitive girl. She shouldn't have to see this, to be a part of this ugliness. But I couldn't turn her away. I took a deep, shuddering breath, wiped the single tear that had escaped from the corner of my eye, and unlocked the door. She stood in the hallway, her face pale and streaked with tears, her new phone clutched in her hand like a piece of damning evidence. She looked so small, so lost. "Grandma." "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I was just trying to get a picture of the candles. And then, and he..." She couldn't finish, her words dissolving into a fresh wave of sobs. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight. "Oh, my sweet girl," I murmured into her hair. "This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. You hear me?" She nodded against my shoulder, but her body was still shaking. After a long moment, she pulled back slightly and held out the phone to me. Her hand was trembling so violently the device was a blur. I think you need to see this," she said, her eyes pleading with me to understand. I took the phone from her. Its cool, smooth surface felt alien in my hand. "Go to your room, sweetheart," I told her gently. "Lock your door. I'll come see you in a little while." She hesitated, looking as if she wanted to stay, to protect me. But she saw the new, hard look in my eyes and simply nodded, giving my hand one last squeeze before turning and hurrying down the hall. I locked the door again and walked on unsteady legs to a wingback chair near the window. Outside, the last light of day had faded, and the vast Texas sky was a blanket of dark, indifferent velvet. For a moment, I just sat there, the phone heavy in my lap. Did I really want to see it? Did I want to relive the single most humiliating moment of my life? Part of me wanted to throw the phone against the wall, to shatter it into a million pieces and pretend it never happened. Part of me, the mother in me, wanted to find excuses for David, to believe he had just snapped under pressure, that he didn't mean it. But the other part of me, the part that had survived droughts and recessions, the part that had stood shoulder to shoulder with Frank as we clawed our way to the top, I knew that sentiment was a luxury I could no longer afford. I needed to see the unvarnished truth. My hand was shaking as I pressed the play button. The video started with the sounds of a happy family. Jacob was laughing at something. I could hear my own voice, bright and cheerful. The camera panned unsteadily across the beautifully set table, the glittering tree. It was a perfect Christmas scene. And then, the camera settled on me as I approached the head of the table. Watching it from this third-person perspective was a brutal, out-of-body experience. I saw it all, with a clarity that stole my breath. I saw David's approach, his face a mask of false confidence. I heard his cold, rehearsed words. I saw my own confused, hurt expression. And then I saw the push. It was worse than I remembered. It wasn't a moment of lost temper. It was deliberate, calculated. It was an act of violence. I watched my own 72-year-old body stumble backward, my arms flailing, my face a mask of pure shock. I saw the fall, the sickening thud, as I hit the unforgiving marble. But it was the aftermath that truly turned my blood to ice. As my on-screen self lay stunned on the floor, the camera, still recording, caught the reactions. David stood over me, his expression not of horror or regret, but of grim, resolute justification. And behind him, I saw Monica. The mask slipped. For one fleeting, terrible second, a smirk of pure, unadulterated triumph curled her lips. She had won. In that instant, watching that smirk, Something inside me broke, but it wasn't my spirit. It was the last, fragile thread of maternal love and denial that I had been clinging to. The pain didn't vanish, but it began to change, to transmute. It cooled and hardened, crystallizing from raw, weeping grief into something sharp, dense, and powerful. It became rage. A cold, clear, and focused rage. I didn't cry. The tears that had been welling in my eyes simply evaporated, burned away by this new volcanic heat rising within me. The woman who had been pushed to the floor was a victim. The woman watching this video was not. My gaze drifted from the phone screen to the large, silver-framed photograph on my bedside table. It was Frank, taken on our 40th anniversary. He was smiling, his eyes crinkling at the corners, full of the strength and love that had been the bedrock of my life. I looked at his image, and it wasn't a plea for help. It was a promise. They will not destroy what we built, Frank. I will not let them. My hand, which had been trembling moments before, was now perfectly steady. My movements were calm, deliberate. I stood up, walked to my nightstand, and picked up my own phone. My fingers didn't falter as I scrolled through my contacts and found the name Charles Bennett. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm with holiday cheer. "Margaret, Merry Christmas." I took a breath. When I spoke, my voice was not the voice of a weeping, broken old woman. It was a voice he hadn't heard in years, the voice of the woman who had once stared down bankers and union bosses without blinking. It was choked with emotion, yes, but it was layered with steel. It was the voice of a queen reclaiming her throne. "Charles," I said, my words precise and deadly. "I have the proof. Activate it." Christmas morning dawned bright and cold over Dallas. In David and Monica's sterile, modernist mansion, a house of glass and white marble that had always felt more like a corporate headquarters than a home, the mood was one of triumphant celebration. They had done it. The coup was complete. I imagined them waking late, wrapped in $1,000 sheets, the previous night's ugliness already a distant, justified memory. They would see it not as a betrayal, but as a necessary business decision, a changing of the guard. They were the future, I was the past. There would have been no frantic, early morning rush of children eager for presents. Emily and Jacob were with me at the ranch, a fact that probably brought David and Monica a sense of relief. They could celebrate their victory in peace. I see them in my mind's eye, standing in their cavernous living room, glasses of expensive champagne in hand, toasting each other in front of a ridiculously oversized, professionally decorated Christmas tree that was as perfect and soulless as the rest of their house. "To the new era of Ellison construction," Monica would have said, her voice smug, her eyes glittering with ambition. "And to its new chairman." She would clink her glass against David's, the crystal ringing out in the quiet house. "To us," David would reply, a proud, foolish smile spreading across his face. He finally felt like the man of the house, the king of the castle. He was blind to the fact that he was merely a prince consort, and Monica was the one truly wearing the crown. He probably expected his phone to be blowing up. He likely anticipated a barrage of angry, tearful, or pleading calls from me. 47 missed calls. 100 desperate texts. That's what he would have considered a victory. It would have fed his ego, confirming that he had broken me, that I was now powerless, and pleading for scraps from his table. But the morning passed in silence. My number never appeared on his screen. It was Monica, of course, who saw it first. She was surgically attached to her phone, her thumb in a state of perpetual scrolling. While David was admiring a new, obscenely expensive watch she had gifted him, she was scanning his emails, which he had long ago given her full access to. "Well, well," she would have murmured, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. "What have we here?" David, still basking in the glow of his new authority, would have looked over her shoulder. "What is it?" "An email," she'd say, her tone dripping with amusement. "From Charles Bennett's office, sent at 6 a.m. on Christmas morning. How festive." I can picture them reading it together, their heads bent over the small, glowing screen. The language of the email would have been brutally formal, stripped of all sentiment. It was pure legal ice. Subject: Formal Notice of Intent to Enforce Clause 12B of the Ellison Family Trust and Holdings Agreement. Dear Mr. Ellison, This letter serves as formal and official notification that, as of 9 p.m., on December 24th, a triggering event as defined in Clause 12b of the aforementioned agreement has occurred. Consequently, Mrs. Margaret Ellison is hereby exercising her irrevocable right to purchase your full and complete controlling interest, 51%, in Ellison Construction Incorporated. As stipulated, the purchase price for this transfer of shares is contractually fixed at the sum of $1 USD. Please expect to receive formal transfer documents and further instructions from our office within the next business day. We advise you to secure legal counsel. Sincerely, Charles Bennett, Associates. There would have been a moment of stunned silence as they processed the words. Then, the laughter would begin. It wouldn't be a small chuckle of disbelief. It would be a full-throated, condescending roar. Monica would throw her head back and laugh, a sharp, ugly sound that echoed off the marble floors. Is she serious? Monica would gasp, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. $1? The old woman has finally lost her mind. This is pathetic. David's own laughter would be a beat behind hers, a little less certain at first, but then growing in volume as he took his cue from his wife. She's bluffing. It's a scare tactic. What did she think? That I'd see this and come running back to her, begging for forgiveness. It's a Hail Mary pass from a quarterback with a broken arm, Monica would sneer, her confidence absolute. She's got nothing. The clause itself is probably unenforceable, some sentimental nonsense your father cooked up that would never hold up in court. They would have dissected it, picking it apart with the arrogance of people who believe they are untouchable. Their entire analysis would have hinged on one simple, fatally flawed assumption. And let's be real, David would say, puffing out his chest. Even if, in some fantasy world, this clause was ironclad, where would she get the money? Monica would nod, swirling her champagne. Exactly. She's asset-rich but cash-poor. All her wealth is tied up in the company you control. To buy you out, she'd need access to hundreds of millions in liquid capital to cover the company's debts and operational costs, even if the share price is $1. No bank would ever give her that kind of loan without the company as collateral, and we would never approve it. It's a dead end. She has absolutely no way to fund it. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. They were so sure, so wrapped up in their own cleverness. They saw the world through a lens of balance sheets and stock prices, and in that world they were invincible. They couldn't conceive of a strategy that relied on anything else. The idea that my power might come from a source they couldn't quantify, from loyalty, from a father's foresight, from a granddaughter's love, was completely alien to them. So they dismissed it. They laughed it off as the desperate last-ditch effort of a bitter old woman. They had fought a battle of brute force and won. They had no idea that I was fighting a completely different war on a battlefield they couldn't even see. They deleted the email, poured another glass of champagne, and went about their Christmas day, secure in the knowledge that they had won. They were celebrating a victory, completely unaware that the single quiet email they had just laughed at wasn't a pathetic bluff. It was the sound of a well-oiled guillotine sliding into place. While David and Monica were laughing in their glass house, Helen was sitting in the quiet, silk-paneled study of her own home, and she was not laughing at all. Monica, in her gloating triumph, had forwarded Charles Bennett's email to her mother with a simple, smug message attached. "Can you believe the nerve? She's officially lost it. Lol." Helen read the email once. Then she read it again, her perfectly manicured fingers scrolling slowly down the screen. There was no amusement in her cold, intelligent eyes. David and Monica saw a pathetic bluff. Helen saw a declaration of war from a player she had never underestimated. She knew my late husband, Frank. He was a brilliant, tough-as-nails businessman, but he was also a sentimentalist when it came to his family. This poison pill clause, however, was not the work of a sentimentalist. It was the cold, hard calculation of a master strategist. Frank Ellison did not build half measures into his legal directives. If the clause existed, Helen knew with chilling certainty it was ironclad. More importantly, she knew me. She had spent years observing me, studying me with the detached curiosity of a biologist examining a rival species. She knew that beneath the polite exterior of the society hostess and doting grandmother was the woman who had helped Frank build his empire. I was not prone to hysterics. I did not make empty threats. If I had told Charles Bennett to activate that clause, it was because I held a winning hand. The only question was, what was my ace in the hole? The phrase, provable and irrefutable public humiliation, stuck in her mind. What proof could I possibly have? A witness? A recording? It didn't matter. The fact that I was confident enough to make the move was all the proof Helen needed that David and Monica had blundered, and blundered badly. They had mistaken a sleeping lioness for a house cat, and now they were about to get mauled. Helen did not waste a single second on recriminations. Emotion was a liability. Action was everything. She immediately saw the new shape of the battlefield. This was no longer a simple, two-sided coup. It was a chaotic mess, and chaos was a ladder. Her first call was to her publicist. "Michael, darling," she said, her voice a mask of distress and sorrow. "Something terrible has happened. An internal family matter has escalated. I need you to release a statement on my behalf immediately." Within the hour, a carefully worded statement was leaked to the Dallas Society pages and key financial news outlets. Helen de Winter is profoundly saddened and deeply disturbed by the recent reports of a conflict within the Ellison family. She was not party to, nor did she have any prior knowledge of, the regrettable incident that took place on Christmas Eve. Her only wish is for a swift and peaceful resolution. Her primary concern at this time, as it has always been, is for the stability of Ellison Construction and the preservation of the legacy of its great founder, the late Frank Ellison. It was a masterpiece of plausible deniability. With a few sentences, she had painted herself as a concerned, innocent bystander. She had publicly condemned David's actions without ever mentioning his name, severing herself from him like a surgeon excising a tumor. She had thrown her own daughter and son-in-law directly under the bus while positioning herself as the noble guardian of Frank's legacy. The snake had shed its skin. Her second phase began immediately after. She picked up her private phone and started making calls, not to lawyers, but to the handful of key members on the Ellison Construction Board of Directors. Her first call was to John Carmichael, a gruff, old-school oil man who had served on the board with Frank for 30 years. "John, it's Helen," she said, her voice now filled with a different kind of performance, that of a trusted peer in a time of crisis. "I'm afraid I'm calling with terrible news. I'm sure you'll be hearing whispers soon, so I wanted you to hear it from me first." She laid out a carefully edited version of the story. David, under immense pressure, had suffered a lapse in judgment and behaved appallingly toward me. As a result, I, in a state of understandable emotional distress, was now making rash legal threats that could destabilize the entire company. "This is no longer a family squabble, John," she said, her voice low and serious. "This is a 5-alarm fire. David has proven he is too volatile to lead. Margaret, God love her, is thinking with her heart, not her head. The company is about to be torn apart by their personal war. The shareholders are going to panic." She let him absorb the impending disaster. Then she offered the solution. "The board needs to act," she said calmly. "We need a steady, neutral hand at the tiller to guide us through this storm, someone who isn't emotionally compromised, someone who respected Frank, and who can protect what he built. I am prepared to put my name forward to serve as interim chairwoman until this unfortunate crisis is resolved." She wasn't an ally of David and Monica, fighting for their control. She wasn't an ally of mine, seeking to restore order. She was a third power, emerging from the smoke and chaos. She was a shark that had been circling, and having smelled blood in the water, she was now making her move. The war for Ellison Construction was no longer a duel. It was now a viper's nest, and the three-way battle had officially begun. The first 48 hours after Christmas were a brutal lesson in modern finance. As Monica had so smugly predicted, my plan hit a brick wall, and it hit hard. I went to the banks, the same institutions where the Ellison name had been golden for 40 years. I met with bankers who had called my husband a friend, men who had attended his funeral and spoken of his integrity. They were all very polite. They offered me coffee and condolences. And then, one by one, they turned me down flat. David had been busy. He had used his power as CEO to poison the well, warning every major lender in Dallas that Ellison Construction was in the midst of a hostile takeover attempt and that any capital loaned to me would be at extreme risk. He painted me as an unstable, emotional widow on a vendetta. He made me a pariah overnight. By the third day, I was at my wits' end. I had a loaded gun, but I had no ammunition to fire it. Charles Bennett and I sat in his office, the grim reality of our situation settling over us. We had the law on our side, but in the world of high finance, cash is king, and our coffers were empty. "There's no one left to ask, Margaret," Charles said, the defeat heavy in his voice. I stared out his window at the steel and glass canyons of the city. He was wrong. There was one person left. One name so unthinkable, so far beyond the pale, that I hadn't even allowed myself to consider it until now. "Get me a meeting with Arthur Vance," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Charles looked at me as if I had just suggested we set the building on fire. "Arthur Vance? Margaret, are you out of your mind?" He was Frank's bitterest rival. They spent 30 years trying to put each other out of business. The man is a shark. "I know exactly who he is," I replied, my gaze unwavering. "And right now, a shark is exactly what I need." Arthur Vance's mansion was the physical opposite of my home. Where the Ellison Ranch was warm wood, worn leather, and treasured memories, his home was a monument to cold, modern power. It was all glass, white marble, and sharp angles, filled with abstract art that I found jarring and soulless. It was the home of a man who admired strategy, not sentiment. He met me himself in a vast, minimalist living room that overlooked the city. At 75, Arthur was lean and sharp, his eyes a pale, piercing blue that missed nothing. We had been social adversaries for decades, but we had always shared a quiet, grudging respect for one another's intellect. He respected me far more than he had ever respected my son. "Margaret," he said, foregoing any pleasantries, "to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" I didn't sit down. I had not come for a social call. "Let's cut to the chase, Arthur. You've heard the rumors." "I hear everything," he replied, a faint, calculating smile on his lips. "My son has locked me out of my own company. I have a legal mechanism to take it back, but he's blocked me at every bank in the state. I'm legally entitled to buy his shares, but I lack the capital to run the company once I do. I am backed into a corner." He watched me, his expression unreadable, letting the silence hang in the air. "I need your money, Arthur," I said, laying my cards on the table. "And you need the one thing you've never been able to get, a door into Ellison Construction, a door that only I can open for you." He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the city below, his hands clasped behind his back. He knew the deal of a lifetime when he saw it. He was the only person in Texas with the resources and the nerve to defy David, and the only one who would relish the fight. He turned back to face me. 40%, he said, his voice flat and non-negotiable. "I'll provide the full line of credit you need to operate, and I'll fund your legal battle to the bitter end. In exchange, upon your successful acquisition of your son's shares, you will sign over 40% of the company to me. That's my price." It was a devil's bargain. I would be giving away nearly half of the empire Frank and I had built. I would be handing our greatest enemy a stake in our legacy. But the alternative was to let it all fall into the undeserving, incompetent hands of Monica and David, to let them tarnish everything Frank had stood for. I didn't hesitate. "You have a deal." I held out my hand. Arthur Vance looked at it for a moment, then took it in his own firm, dry grip. The handshake was brief, businesslike. An unholy alliance had just been formed. I had sacrificed a piece of my kingdom, but in doing so, I had just bought myself an army. The Ellison Construction boardroom is on the top floor of a skyscraper in downtown Dallas. It's a space designed to project power, with a 20-foot-long mahogany table polished to a mirror shine and a wall of glass offering a god's-eye view of the city we had built. I had chosen the decor myself years ago, but on that morning, walking into it felt like entering a foreign country. They were all there, the entire board of directors, a collection of grim-faced men in expensive suits, summoned by their CEO for an emergency meeting. At the head of the table, in the seats that had once belonged to Frank and me, sat David and Monica. My son looked every bit the part of the powerful executive, his suit perfectly tailored, his hair perfectly coiffed. He radiated an air of impatient authority. Beside him, Monica was a portrait of icy composure, her hands folded neatly on the table, a slim leather portfolio in front of her. They looked confident, invincible. From their perspective, this was the final act. They had weathered my pathetic legal threat, secured the banks, and were now about to publicly consolidate their power and formally cast me out. They thought this meeting was their coronation. They had no idea it was their execution. The room fell silent as the heavy oak doors swung open. Every head turned. The expressions on the faces of the board members shifted from nervous anticipation to stunned disbelief. David's jaw literally dropped. I walked in first, my steps slow and deliberate on the plush carpet. I wore a simple but impeccably tailored navy blue suit, my hair styled, my expression serene. I was not the hysterical old woman they were expecting. I was the matriarch of Ellison Construction, and I had come to reclaim my house. The second shockwave hit the room a moment later as Charles Bennett followed me in, carrying a briefcase. The third, and most powerful, was the man who entered behind him, Arthur Vance. The sight of my husband's greatest rival walking into the Ellison boardroom sent a ripple of audible gasps through the room. Arthur, looking perfectly at ease in his own bespoke suit, simply nodded to the assembled board members as if he were attending a regular Tuesday meeting. He was followed by a team of 3 sharp, predatory-looking lawyers from his own firm who moved with the silent efficiency of a wolf pack. I saw Helen, seated at the far end of the table. She had positioned herself as the wise elder, the neutral party ready to step in and save the company from the family's implosion. Her mask of calm was flawless, but I saw the flicker of genuine shock in her eyes as she took in the sight of Arthur Vance. This was a variable she had not accounted for. Her carefully constructed plans had just been hit by a tornado. David was the first to find his voice. He shot to his feet, his face turning a blotchy red. "What is the meaning of this? Mother, you are not welcome here. And him?" He jabbed a trembling finger toward Arthur. "This is a private meeting of the Ellison Construction Board of Directors. Security." 2 security guards who had been standing by the door took a step forward, but Charles held up a hand. "That won't be necessary," Charles said, his voice calm and authoritative, cutting through David's blustering. "Mrs. Ellison is here as the primary stakeholder of the Ellison Family Trust, and Mr. Vance is here as her financial counsel." "Financial counsel?" Monica scoffed, her voice dripping with derision. "What is this? A joke? You have no standing here. We are moving to have you formally removed from the trust on grounds of incompetence." "All in due time," Charles said smoothly, not rising to the bait. "But first, there is the matter of the agenda item I submitted this morning. The enforcement of Clause 12B. David let out a harsh, barking laugh. Clause 12B is a fantasy. It's a non-binding, sentimental piece of garbage, and you have absolutely no grounds to enforce it. This meeting is over. Get out." "On the contrary," Charles said, opening his briefcase, "the grounds are, unfortunately, quite solid." He retrieved a small, slim laptop and a projector remote. "As you all know," he said, addressing the now utterly bewildered board, Clause 12B is a unique provision triggered by an act of provable and irrefutable public humiliation against Mrs. Ellison by the acting CEO. We are here today to provide that proof. A palpable tension seized the room. The board members shifted in their seats, exchanging uneasy looks. David and Monica stared, a flicker of uncertainty finally breaking through their arrogant facade. "What proof could we possibly have?" "This is ridiculous," David stammered, but his voice had lost its conviction. Charles didn't answer. He simply aimed the remote at the large screen that descended silently from the ceiling at the far end of the room and pressed a button. The screen flickered to life. For a moment, there was just the image of our beautifully decorated dining room, the Christmas tree glittering, the candles glowing. The sound of cheerful family chatter filled the silent boardroom. I saw a few of the board members relax slightly. This was just a home video. Then the camera found me. It found David. The audio became sharp and clear. Every person in that room heard my son's voice, cold and cruel. "That seat, Helen will be sitting there tonight. They heard my confused reply, my attempt to laugh it off. They heard him snap back, his voice rising with anger. "It represents the past. You're stuck in the past, Mother. It's my house now." I watched David's face as he was forced to listen to his own cruel words echo through the chamber of his power. The color was draining from his cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, grayish pallor. Monica sat frozen beside him, her knuckles white where she gripped the edge of the table. Across the room, Helen's serene mask had finally cracked, replaced by a look of cold, furious disbelief. She was watching her puppet, her chosen king, publicly immolate himself. Then came the moment. On the giant screen, every person in that room saw my son place his hand on my shoulder. They saw him push me. They saw me, their founder's wife, a 72-year-old woman, stumble and fall hard on the marble floor. The collective gasp in the boardroom was sharp and visceral. One of the older board members, a man who had known me for 30 years, muttered, "Good God." The video wasn't done. The sound of my wine glass shattering on the floor was like a gunshot in the tomb-like silence of the room. And then the camera, in its shaky, amateur horror, caught the final, damning detail, Monica's triumphant smirk. That was it. That was the kill shot. The image of that smirk, projected 10 feet high for the entire leadership of Ellison Construction to see, was more devastating than the fall itself. It revealed the malice, the conspiracy, the cold-blooded intent behind the act. Charles clicked the remote, and the screen went black. No one spoke. No one moved. The silence that filled the room was absolute, profound, and suffocating. It was the silence of a tomb. All eyes were on David. He was slumped in his chair, his mouth slightly open, his face as white as a sheet. He looked like a man who had just watched his own soul die. He was utterly, completely, and irrevocably broken. I let the silence hang for a long, heavy moment. I let them all absorb the full weight of what they had just witnessed. I let them sit with the ugliness of it, the shame of it. Then I rose slowly from my chair. I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew a single, crisp, $1 bill. I walked the length of the table, my heels clicking softly on the floor, the only sound in the world. I stopped beside my son's chair. He didn't look up at me. He couldn't. I placed the dollar bill on the polished mahogany table, directly in front of him. It lay there, a small, green rectangle of ultimate ruin. My voice, when I spoke, was not loud. It did not need to be. It was calm, clear, and carried the weight of absolute victory. According to the clause, I said, my gaze sweeping across the stunned faces of the board, this company is now mine. The only person in the room who wasn't in a state of shock was Arthur Vance. He was leaning back in his chair, a small, almost imperceptible smile of pure, intellectual satisfaction on his face. He had not come to see a fight. He had come to witness a masterpiece of strategy. And he had not been disappointed. In the days that followed the board meeting, a deep and unnatural quiet settled over the Ellison ranch. The dust from the explosion had settled, but the air was still thick with the fallout. The war was over, but the silence that remained was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a graveyard. David and Monica came to collect their things on a gray, overcast afternoon. There was no confrontation, no final, dramatic showdown. The time for words, for anger, for anything but the grim business of severance was long past. They moved through the house like ghosts, their footfalls echoing in the empty halls. I watched them from the landing of the grand staircase, unseen. David was a hollowed-out version of the son I once knew. His shoulders were slumped, his face was gaunt and colorless, and he avoided looking at anything for too long, as if the very objects in his childhood home were now judging him. He packed his belongings with the slow, mechanical movements of a man in a trance, a man who had lost everything and was only now beginning to comprehend the depths of his own foolishness. He had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. Monica was a different story. Her silence was not born of shock or shame. It was a coiled, furious thing. She packed with a brutal, angry efficiency, her movements sharp and jerky. She slammed drawers and cupboards shut, the sounds like punctuation marks in her wordless rage. She didn't look broken. She looked like a cornered animal, temporarily defeated but already plotting her next move from the ruins of this one. She didn't spare a single glance for the home she had schemed so desperately to control. For her, it was just a prize that had been snatched from her grasp. As they carried the last of their designer suitcases out the door, she never once looked back. Helen, in her typical fashion, had been far more pragmatic. She hadn't bothered with a formal farewell. By the time the ink was dry on the preliminary transfer documents, she had already vanished. No phone call, no note. She had simply disappeared from our lives as cleanly and silently as she had entered them. She had played her hand and lost, and like any good gambler, she knew when to fold and walk away from the table without a fuss. She had cut her losses and moved on to the next game. After they were all gone, I walked through the quiet rooms of my house. It felt cavernous, empty. The grand dining room where my humiliation had been staged was now just a room with a table. The living room, where we had once laughed and opened Christmas presents, was just a space with furniture. The victory I had fought so hard for felt profoundly hollow. There was no surge of triumph, no feeling of vindication. I just felt tired, a deep, soul-crushing weariness that settled into my bones. The taste of victory was the taste of ash in my mouth. The next day, Arthur Vance came to the ranch. He didn't bring his team of lawyers this time. He came alone. We sat in Frank's study, a room where so many landmark deals had been signed. Charles Bennett was there with me, and he laid out the final, ironclad documents on the massive oak desk. The paperwork that would formally transfer 40% of Ellison Construction to my husband's greatest rival. Arthur read through the documents with his usual sharp, dispassionate focus. He wasn't gloating. This wasn't personal for him. It was just business. And it had been a very, very good piece of business. "It's all in order," he said finally, placing the papers down. "A deal's a deal, Arthur," I said, my voice steady. I picked up the heavy, gold-plated pen that had belonged to Frank, the one he'd used to sign the company's incorporation papers all those years ago. For a fleeting second, my hand hesitated over the signature line. This was it. I was willingly giving away a massive piece of the legacy Frank and I had bled for. I was letting the enemy through the gates. But I remembered David's face, Monica's smirk, and my resolve hardened. I had saved the soul of the company, even if it meant sacrificing a part of its body. I signed my name. The stroke of the pen was the only sound in the room. I pushed the documents across the desk to Arthur. He countersigned without a word, his own signature a sharp, angular script. It was done. He stood up, gathering his copies. "You fought a good fight, Margaret," he said, a note of genuine, intellectual respect in his voice. It was the highest compliment he was capable of giving. "Frank would have been proud of your strategy. Frank would have hated that it ever came to this," I replied softly. He gave a curt nod, as if to concede the point, and then he left. I sat there in the study, staring at the empty chair where he had been, feeling the full weight of what I had just done. I had won the war, but the cost had been staggering. My son was gone. My family was fractured, and my company was now partially owned by a shark. Was this what I had wanted? Power? Control? No. I realized with a sudden, painful clarity that all I had ever truly wanted was the peace that had been stolen from me. I was still sitting there, lost in the quiet wreckage of my thoughts, when I heard a different kind of sound break the silence. It wasn't the sound of packing or lawyers. It was the sound of life. The thunder of small feet on the grand staircase, the sound of unrestrained laughter. The study door burst open, and Jacob and Emily tumbled in. "Grandma!" Jacob yelled, launching himself at me. His arms wrapped around my neck in a tight, fierce hug that almost knocked the wind out of me. Emily was right behind him, her arms wrapping around us both. She rested her head on my shoulder, her grip just as strong. "We saw the cars leave," Emily whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Are you okay?" I held my grandchildren, my two precious, beautiful grandchildren, and for the first time in days, I felt something other than exhaustion and grief. I breathed in the scent of their hair, felt the warmth of their small, strong bodies clinging to me. This was real. "We're not going anywhere, Grandma," Jacob said, his voice muffled against my suit jacket. "We're going to stay here with you, always." Tears, hot and real, finally welled in my eyes and spilled down my cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness or anger. They were tears of a deep, profound, and heartbreaking relief. I had lost a son, but I had not lost my family. I had lost a piece of my company, but I had not lost my legacy. My legacy was right here, holding me, loving me. And in that moment, surrounded by the ashes of my old life, I finally felt the first fragile flicker of a new and different kind of peace. A year has passed. The seasons have turned, and so has my life. I no longer live at the Ellison Ranch. The grand, silent house with its sprawling lands and painful memories was a gilded cage, and I have finally set myself free. My home now is a small, beautiful house nestled on the shore of a quiet lake, a little ways outside of Dallas. It's a house filled not with the ghosts of the past, but with sunlight and the scent of lake water and baking bread. Instead of long, echoing hallways, I have cozy rooms filled with books. Instead of acres of manicured lawns, I have a small, wild, and beautiful garden that I tend to myself. This morning, the Texas sun is warm on my back as I prune my rose bushes. The petals are a deep, velvety red, and their fragrance fills the air. This is where I find my peace now, with my hands in the soil, coaxing life from the earth. The silence here is different from the silence at the ranch. It isn't an absence of sound, it's a presence of peace. It's the gentle lapping of water against the shore, the buzz of a honeybee, the cheerful, uncomplicated song of a cardinal in the old oak tree. A familiar crunch of tires on the gravel driveway pulls me from my thoughts. A smile spreads across my face, genuine and easy. I pull off my gardening gloves and turn just as two figures spill out of a car, their laughter preceding them. "Grandma," Jacob yells, his 14-year-old voice cracking with the endearing awkwardness of adolescence. He's all long limbs and boundless energy, and he closes the distance between us in a few loping strides, wrapping me in a hug that lifts me clean off the ground. Emily, now a poised and graceful 17, follows at a more sedate pace, but her smile is just as bright. "We brought you that new mystery novel you wanted," she says, holding up a book as she gives me her own warm embrace. "And Jacob ate half the cookies we were supposed to bring on the drive over." "Did not," Jacob protests, his mouth already full of another cookie. Their weekend visits are the rhythm of my new life, the steady, joyful beat of my heart. We spend our time fishing off the small wooden dock, baking, playing board games, and talking. We talk about everything: their friends, their school, their dreams for the future. We never talk about that Christmas. We don't have to. We survived it, and the bond forged between us in that fire is stronger than steel. After the boardroom meeting, the path forward became surprisingly clear. The fight had taken its toll, and I had no desire to return to the cutthroat world of corporate power plays. Arthur Vance, true to his nature, saw an opportunity. He made me an offer, not for another 40%, but for the rest of my controlling interest in Ellison Construction. It was a fair offer, a ridiculously generous one. He didn't have to make it. He already had his foot in the door. But I think in his own way he understood. He wasn't just buying a company. He was buying my freedom, and he knew the price was high. I accepted. I kept only a small, non-controlling block of shares, which I placed into a tightly managed trust fund for Emily and Jacob. My children's children would never have to worry about money, but they would have to make their own way in the world. They would have to build their own legacies, not inherit a tarnished one. I walked away from the empire I helped build. I left the money, the power, the influence, and the name on the side of the skyscraper, and I have never, for one single moment, regretted it. Later that afternoon, after a long and lazy lunch on the porch, Emily brings me the mail. It's the usual collection of bills and catalogs, but there's one thing that stands out: a postcard. The picture on the front is of a sleek, modern skyscraper in Shanghai. The handwriting on the back is sharp and angular, instantly recognizable. "Margaret, heard you sold the rest of your shares. Smart move. You won, you know. You always win. A.V." I hold the postcard for a long time, looking at Arthur's familiar, arrogant script. He thinks I won the war we fought, the corporate battle, the fight for control of Ellison Construction. He sees the world in terms of wins and losses, of territories conquered and deals closed. He will never understand the truth. My victory wasn't the moment I placed that dollar bill on the boardroom table. My victory wasn't bankrupting my son or outmaneuvering my enemies. My real victory is this. It's the warmth of the sun on my face. It's the sound of my grandson's laughter as he skips a stone across the lake. It's the quiet pride in my granddaughter's eyes as she talks about the university she wants to attend. They tried to take everything from me. My home, my company, my dignity. They thought those things were the source of my strength. They thought power was something you owned, a title you held, a number in a bank account. They were so busy fighting for the throne, they never realized that the real kingdom was something you carry inside your own heart. They lost the moment they forgot what it means to be a family. I look up from the postcard and out at the sparkling water. Jacob is trying to teach Emily his stone-skipping technique, and she's laughing, her head thrown back in the golden afternoon light. My heart feels full, not with the hollow pride of ownership, but with the quiet, profound joy of belonging. This is my legacy. Not the steel and glass towers downtown, but this peace, this love. This is the one thing they could never have taken from me. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment 1 below. If not, feel free to comment 0 so we know and can improve future videos. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching. Yeah, babe, come live with us. My mom's retired, and she's going to help with our expenses. I heard those words coming from my son Steven's mouth as he talked on the phone in the hallway. It was 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night. He thought I was sleeping, but I wasn't. For months, sleep had been slipping through my fingers like water. I lay motionless in bed, my eyes open in the darkness of my room. Every word that left his lips stabbed into my chest like something cold and heavy. His voice sounded happy, enthusiastic, as if he were closing a good deal. And maybe it was. A deal in which I was the merchandise. My mom's retired, and she's going to help with our expenses. I repeated those words in silence, them moving in my head like an echo that wouldn't stop. Help with expenses. That's what I was to him now. Not his mother. Not the woman who held him in her arms for entire nights when he cried from colic. Not the one who sold her gold rings to pay for his college. Just a retiree who could help with expenses. I felt something break inside me, something that had been cracked for a long time, but at that moment, it split in two. I didn't cry. I learned years ago that tears don't change anything. I just lay there, staring at the dark ceiling of my room, listening as my son continued to talk to that woman, to Jessica, his girlfriend, the one who never looked at me with kindness, the one who always found fault in everything I cooked, in how I dressed, in how I spoke. Yeah, she doesn't suspect a thing. I'm going to start organizing everything tomorrow. We'll bring her over in a week, tops. Those were the last words I managed to hear before Stephen hung up the phone. I heard his footsteps moving away down the hall. I heard the guest room door close softly. He was staying over that night, as he sometimes did when he had early meetings in the city. I remained motionless, petrified. My name is Helen Mendez. I am 71 years old. I've lived alone in this house for 5 years, ever since my husband Ernest died of a sudden heart attack one April morning. This house is small, but it's mine. We paid for it for 30 years, brick by brick, sacrifice after sacrifice. The walls are white, although time has turned them a dull gray color. There are cracks in the kitchen ceiling that I never repaired. There's a water stain in the corner of the bathroom that grows every winter. But it's my house. My space. The only place in the world where I still feel like myself. Or at least it was until that night. That Wednesday night when I heard my only son planning my life as if I were a piece of furniture that could be moved from one place to another. As if my decisions didn't matter. As if my voice didn't exist. On Thursday morning, Stephen woke up early. I heard him moving around the house while I pretended to sleep. He made coffee, ate something quickly, and he left without saying goodbye. Without knocking on my bedroom door. Without a "see you later, Mom." Nothing. Just the sound of the front door closing and his car's engine fading down the street. I got up when silence filled everything again. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I saw a woman with gray hair, short and shapeless. I saw deep wrinkles around my eyes and mouth. I saw someone the world considers invisible. An old woman. A burden. An expense. But behind those tired eyes, there was something else. There was a woman who still remembered who she was before becoming a mother, a wife, a widow. There was a woman who still had dignity, and that woman was not going to let herself be used like this. I ate breakfast in silence. A piece of toast with butter and black coffee, always the same. I looked out the kitchen window toward the small garden where Ernest used to plant tomatoes. Now there's only dry earth and some weeds growing out of control. I don't have the strength to maintain it. I don't have the desire. Friday. Stephen didn't come. Nor Saturday. Nor Sunday. 3 days without showing up. Without calling. Without a text. He who used to come every 2 weeks at least to have coffee with me suddenly disappeared. And I knew why. He was organizing everything behind my back, preparing the trap, clearing the path to take me to him and Jessica without giving me the option to refuse. Monday morning. I heard a car stop in front of my house, then another. I looked through the living room window and felt the air leave my lungs. It was Stephen, and he was with Jessica. Behind them, a white moving truck with orange lettering on the sides. 3 men got out of the truck, waiting for instructions. Stephen rang the doorbell. Once, twice, 3 times. Insistently, as if he had the right, as if this were his house and not mine. I opened the door slowly. Stephen was smiling. A big, fake smile, the kind you put on for photographs. Jessica was behind him, wearing sunglasses and an expensive purse hanging from her arm. She wasn't smiling. She never did with me. "Mom, hey!" "What a surprise. Good thing you're awake. We came to get you. Everything's ready." His voice sounded too cheerful, too forced, as if he were acting in a play. I stayed in the doorway, looking at him without saying anything, waiting. "We've prepared a beautiful room for you in our apartment. You'll be much better there. You'll have company. You won't be alone, and we'll take care of you. Right, babe?" Jessica nodded, but her lips were pressed tight. She didn't say a word. She just looked inside my house with those cold eyes she always had, as if calculating, as if measuring. "Stephen, I don't." "No, Mom, don't say anything. We already talked about this." "Well, we didn't. But I know what's best for you. You're alone here. This house is too big for you. And besides, your pension. Well, we'll all manage it better together." There it was, the naked truth. My pension. My $800 a month, that was all I had left after a lifetime of working. That's what he wanted. Not me. Not my company. Just my money. The men from the truck were waiting on the street. Stephen made a gesture with his hand, as if telling them to wait another moment. Jessica took out her phone and started texting something, ignoring me completely. "Mom, let me in. We're going to pack your things. It's not much. Just the essentials will do. Clothes, documents, a few photos. The rest we'll sell or donate. After all, you don't need it anymore. Sell, donate. You don't need it." Every word was a sentence, a blow, a silent theft of everything I was. But I didn't move. I stayed standing in the doorway, my hands gripping the frame, feeling my heartbeat stronger and stronger. Stephen started to lose his patience. His smile twisted a little. "Mom, don't make this difficult. It's for your own good. For my good." How many times in my life had I heard that phrase, and how many times did it mean the exact opposite? Stephen took a step forward, trying to gently push me inside. But in that moment, when his hand touched my shoulder, when he thought I was going to give in as always, something changed. Something in my gaze, something in my posture. "I'm not going anywhere, Stephen." My voice came out firm, clear, without a tremor. Stephen stopped. Jessica looked up from her phone for the first time. They both looked at me as if I had said something in another language. "What do you mean? You're not going anywhere?" "Mom, it's all arranged. The guys are waiting. I don't care what's arranged. This is my house. And I'm not leaving." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. Stephen looked at Jessica. Jessica looked at him. They both seemed confused, as if they hadn't planned for this possibility, as if it had never occurred to them that I could say no. "Mom, don't be stubborn. This is ridiculous. You'll be better off with us." "Better for whom, Stephen?" "For you?" He pressed his lips together. His face turned red. Jessica took a step closer, taking off her sunglasses. Her eyes were hard as stones. "Mrs. Mendez, I don't think you understand the situation. Stephen is trying to help you. You can't keep living alone. It's dangerous. And frankly, you don't have the resources to maintain this house. My resources are mine, and this house is too." Jessica let out a short, dry laugh, full of contempt. "Your resources, $800 a month. That doesn't even cover the lights and water. It covers it for me." Stephen raised his hands, trying to calm the situation. "That's enough. Mom, you're going to go inside, you're going to pack, and we're leaving. Period. I'm not going to argue about this anymore. Then you should go, because I'm not moving from here." And I shut the door, right in their faces. With force, with anger, with all the dignity I had left. After closing the door, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage that had been bottled up for too long. I heard Stephen and Jessica talking outside. Their voices were a confused murmur. Then the sound of the truck starting. Then silence. I leaned against the door, breathing deeply. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my temples. 71 years old, and I was just now learning to say no. Just now defending what was mine. I walked to the living room and sat on the worn-out sofa where Ernest used to fall asleep watching the news. I closed my eyes and let the memories come. Because I needed to remember. I needed to feel again everything I had given, everything I had sacrificed, to understand why this betrayal hurt so much. Stephen was born in February of 1979. It was a difficult birth. 32 hours of labor in the county hospital where the nurses were too busy to hear my screams. Ernest waited outside that whole time, pacing the hallway. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he ran in. He had tears in his eyes. "It's a boy," he told me. "A strong boy." Stephen weighed 9 pounds, 4 ounces. He was huge, pink, perfect. I looked at him and felt that everything in the world made sense. I felt that my life had just truly begun. Ernest worked at a furniture factory. I worked cleaning houses. 3 houses a week, 6 days of work. I earned $80 a house, $240 a week, about $1,000 a month. It was little, but it was enough if we were careful, if we didn't allow ourselves any luxuries, if we saved every penny. Stephen grew up in this house. We painted his room light yellow when he was 2. We bought a second-hand crib that Ernest sanded and varnished until it looked new. I sewed his clothes. Pants from cheap fabrics I found at the market. Shirts I made by hand from scraps. Stephen never had new shoes until he started elementary school. He always inherited them from the children of the ladies I worked for. But he didn't know. I never told him we were poor. I never let him feel less than other children. There was always food on the table. There was always a hug when he got home from school. There was always someone waiting for him. When Stephen turned 7, Ernest had an accident at the factory. A table saw cut off 3 fingers on his left hand. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks. The company didn't pay for anything. They left us alone. I had to work double, 5 houses a week, 7 days, no rest. I got up at 5 in the morning and returned at 8 at night. Stephen stayed with my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. She watched him for $5 a day, $35 a week that came out of my salary. Ernest fell into depression. He stopped looking for work. He said no one wanted to hire a man with a mutilated hand. He said he was useless. I cried silently at night while he slept. I cried from exhaustion, from frustration, from fear, but I kept going because I had to, because Stephen needed me. The years passed. Stephen finished elementary school, then high school. He was always a good student. He got high grades. The teachers said he was smart, that he had a future, that he could go to college. College? That word sounded so distant, so impossible, but I wanted to give him that. I wanted him to have what I never had. I wanted him to study, to be someone, so he wouldn't have to clean other people's houses or work in dangerous factories. When Stephen finished high school, he came to me with a brochure from the state university. He wanted to get a business degree. Tuition cost $500 a month, plus books. plus transportation, plus food. In total, about $700 a month. I earned about $1,000 a month. Ernest had found a job as a night watchman and earned $800. We had $1,800 a month between us. The mortgage was $400. Utilities, $150. Food, $400. We had $450 left over. If Stephen studied, we would be left with… Wait, that didn't add up. Let's see. 1,800 in. 400 for the mortgage, 150 for utilities, 400 for food. That's 950 in expenses. We had 850 left over. If college cost 700, we'd only have 150 left for everything else. It was impossible. But I said yes. I sold my gold rings. The ones Ernest gave me when we got married. They were the only valuable thing I had. I sold them for $2,000. With that money, we paid for Stephen's first 4 months of college. After that, I had to find more work. I started washing clothes at night. The ladies would bring me bundles of dirty laundry and I'd wash them by hand in the utility sink. $10 a load. I washed 5 loads a night. An extra $250 a week. $1,000 a month. With that, we covered the college costs. My hands became covered in calluses. My back started to hurt all the time. But I didn't care. Stephen was studying. Stephen was going to be someone. For 4 years I worked like that, non-stop, without rest, without complaining. Stephen graduated with honors. He got a job at an accounting firm. He started earning well. $3,000 a month. Then $4,000. Then $5,000. He moved into a condo downtown, a small but nice place. I thought he would invite us to visit. But he never did. He said he was too busy, that work consumed him, that he'd come by when he had time. The time never came. Ernest died when Stephen was 32. It was sudden, a heart attack while watching television. One moment he was there, breathing, alive. The next, he was gone. I called Stephen, crying. He arrived 2 hours later. He stayed for the funeral. 3 days. Then he left. He said he had to get back to work, that he couldn't stay any longer. He left me alone in this house, with the memories, with the silence, with the absence. The years passed. Stephen came to visit me once a month, sometimes every 2 months. Always in a hurry, always looking at his watch. We'd have coffee, talk about unimportant things, and he'd leave. Then he met Jessica. He introduced her to me 2 years ago. A tall, thin woman, with straight black hair and cold eyes. She worked in advertising, earned more than Stephen, came from a family with money. You could tell by how she talked, by how she dressed, by how she looked at me. From the beginning, I knew she didn't want me around. I saw it in the way she greeted me. A kiss in the air, without touching me. No warmth, as if I were contagious. "What a cozy house," she said the first time she came. And I knew cozy was her polite way of saying old and ugly. Stephen changed when he started dating her. He became more distant, colder. The visits became even more spaced out. The calls became shorter. I became an obligation, something he had to do, but that bothered him. And now this. Now the plan to take me to live with them. Not out of love, not out of genuine concern, but for my pension. For my $800 a month that they thought they could manage better than I could. I opened my eyes. The living room was in shadows. The sun had moved and no longer came through the window. I looked at the wall clock. 2 hours had passed since Stephen left. I got up from the sofa and walked to my bedroom. I opened the closet and looked on the top shelf. There was the shoebox where I kept my important documents. I took it down carefully. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Inside were my birth certificate, my marriage certificate, Ernest's death certificate, the deed to the house, my Medicare card. Everything that proved who I was. Everything that proved this life was mine. There were also photographs. Stephen, as a baby. Stephen on his first day of school. Stephen at his college graduation. Me by his side, smiling with pride. He was smiling too. But now, looking at those photos, I wondered if it had ever been real. If he had ever seen me as anything more than a means to get what he wanted, I put everything back in the box. I put it back in its place. And at that moment, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just wait for Stephen to come back. For him to insist. For him to bring lawyers or social workers or whoever was necessary to force me out of my house. I had to act. I had to protect myself. But I didn't know how. I didn't know where to start. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen, drinking chamomile tea, looking out the window at the darkness. Thinking, remembering, planning. On Tuesday morning, the phone rang. It was 8:30. I was in the kitchen having coffee, still in my bathrobe. I looked at the old phone mounted on the wall. It was Stephen. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. 4. Finally, I answered. "Mom, we need to talk." His voice sounded tense. It was no longer the cheerful, fake voice from yesterday. It was the voice of someone who is losing control and doesn't like it. "We already talked yesterday, Stephen." "No. Mom, yesterday you shut the door. That's not talking. That's being childish. Childish. Me. The woman who raised him. Who sold her rings for his education. Who washed clothes until her hands bled. I was the childish one. Tell me what you want, Stephen. I want you to be reasonable." Jessica and I spent all night talking. And we came to the conclusion that you're confused, that you don't understand what's best for you, so we're going to give you a few days to think it over. But I need you to understand something. That house is falling apart. You can't maintain it. And you can't live alone at your age. I'm 71, not 90. It's the same thing, Mom. You're a senior citizen. You need supervision. You need someone to look out for you. Supervision. As if I were a child. As if I were incapable. I'm fine, Stephen. No, you're not fine. And if you don't want to accept our help, then we're going to have to look for other options. What options? There was a silence. A long, heavy silence. When Stephen spoke again, his voice was lower. More calculating. There are very good nursing homes for people your age. Places where you can be with people like you. Where there are nurses, activities. You wouldn't be alone. Nursing homes. Places where they put old people when the family doesn't want them anymore. Places where they sit you in a wheelchair, even if you can walk. Where they give you pills to keep you quiet. Where you wait for death staring at white walls. I'm not going to any nursing home. Then agree to come with us. It's the only reasonable option. It's not the only option. I can stay here, in my house. Stephen sighed. A long, exaggerated sigh. As if I were the most difficult person in the world. Fine, Mom. You win. For now. But think about it. Really think about it. Because you can't go on like this. And he hung up. Without saying goodbye. Without an "I love you." Without anything. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling the rage rise in my chest. But I also felt something else. Fear. Because Stephen had mentioned nursing homes. And that meant he wasn't going to give up. That he was going to keep pushing. That he was going to find a way to get me out of here. Wednesday. Stephen didn't call. Nor Thursday. The silence was worse than the calls. Because I didn't know what he was planning. I didn't know what would come next. On Friday afternoon, while I was watering the few plants I have in the garden, I saw an unfamiliar car park in front of my house. It was a gray sedan. New. Shiny. A young woman got out, about 30 years old, wearing a black pantsuit and carrying a folder. She walked up to my gate and rang the bell. I opened it slowly, without leaving my property, just peering through the fence. Helen Mendez? It wasn't a question. It was a statement. She knew who I was. Yes. My name is Lauren Adams. I'm a social worker with Adult Protective Services. Your son Stephen contacted me. He says he's concerned about your well-being. I felt the ground move beneath my feet. Stephen had called social services. He was trying to declare me incompetent. To take away my autonomy. My freedom. I'm fine. I don't need help. Lauren smiled. A professional, cold smile. The smile of someone who has heard those words 1,000 times before. "Ma'am, I just need to ask you a few questions. It's routine. Your son mentioned that you live alone, that the house is in poor condition, and that you might need assistance. May I come in?" "No." The word came out firm, clear. Lauren stopped smiling. Mrs. Mendez, I understand this may be uncomfortable, but I have the authority to. This is my house, and I didn't invite you in. If you have questions, ask them from there. Lauren pressed her lips together. She opened her folder and took out a sheet with printed questions. Are you currently on any medication? No. Do you have any chronic illnesses? High blood pressure. It's under control. Can you cook for yourself? Yes. Can you bathe without assistance? Yes. Can you manage your own finances? Yes. Do you receive regular visitors? From whom? Family? Friends? My son visits when he can. My friends do too. It was a lie. I didn't have any friends. The few I had died or moved away. But she didn't have to know that. Lauren wrote something on her sheet. Then she looked me up and down. Her eyes stopped on my old bathrobe, my worn-out slippers, my uncombed hair. Mrs. Mendez, I'm going to be honest with you. Your son is considering starting a legal process to obtain conservatorship. He says you're not in a condition to make decisions for yourself. If that happens, a judge will evaluate your case. And if the judge determines that you need a legal guardian, your son could take control of your finances, your housing, everything. The words fell on me like stones. Conservatorship. Control. Everything. Stephen wanted to take everything from me. Legally. He wanted to declare me incompetent so he could do whatever he wanted with my money. With my house. With me. That's not going to happen. Lauren closed her folder. I hope you're right, ma'am. But I recommend you seek legal advice. This could get complicated. And she left. She got into her gray car and drove down the street. I stood there, clinging to the gate, feeling everything collapse around me. That night, sitting on my bed with the lights off, I cried for the first time in years. They weren't soft tears. They were deep sobs that came from a dark, forgotten place. I cried for Ernest, for the lost years, for the son I thought I had, who never really existed. I cried for myself, for the woman I was, and who I no longer knew if I still was. But at some point, between the tears, something changed. I felt a spark, small, barely perceptible. But it was there. It was rage. It was indignation. It was the certainty that I was not going to let myself be destroyed like this. On Saturday morning, I got up early. I showered. I got dressed in clean clothes. I combed my hair in front of the mirror, and I left my house for the first time in days. I walked 3 blocks to Mrs. Peterson's house, my old neighbor, the one who watched Stephen when he was a child. She was 82 years old now, lived alone too, but her mind was still clear, sharp. I knocked on her door. She opened it with a smile. Helen! What a surprise. Come in, come in. We went into her small, cozy living room. It smelled like cinnamon and coffee. She offered me a cup, and I accepted. Carmen, I need your advice, and I told her everything. From the phone call I overheard to the social worker's visit, Carmen listened to me in silence, nodding from time to time. When I finished, she sighed. That boy was always selfish. I watched him grow up, and I always knew it. But you never wanted to see it. She was right. I had closed my eyes to the signs, to the moments when Stephen showed his true character, because he was my son, because I loved him, because I didn't want to accept that I had failed. What do I do, Carmen? She took my hand in hers. Her fingers were gnarled and cold. You fight. You don't let them. You get help. And you protect what's yours. But I don't know how. I don't either. But I know someone who does. Carmen got up and went to her bedroom. She came back with a wrinkled business card. This man is a lawyer. His name is Arthur Wallace. He defended my cousin when her son tried to take her house. He won the case. He's good. And he doesn't charge a lot. I took the card. It was worn, with bent corners, but the name was clear. Arthur Wallace, attorney at law, and a phone number. Call him, Helen. Today. Don't wait any longer. I went back to my house with the card clutched in my hand. I went inside, closed the door, and dialed the number. It rang 3 times before someone answered. Hello. It was a man's voice. Hoarse, tired. I'm looking for Mr. Arthur Wallace. This is he. Who's this? My name is Helen Mendez. Carmen Peterson gave me your number. I need help. My son is trying to take my house. There was a pause. Can you come to my office on Monday at 10 in the morning? Yes, I'll be there. Bring all your documents. The deed, ID, bank statements, everything you have. I hung up, and for the first time in days, I felt something like hope. Sunday passed slowly, like a wound that won't close. I spent it organizing documents, looking for old papers in forgotten drawers. The deed to the house was in a yellowish envelope, signed in 1983, 42 years paying for this property. My old ID photo from 5 years ago showed me looking younger, more alive. I also found the receipts for the last 6 months. Electricity, water, phone, all paid on time, all with my name on them. Proof that I was capable of managing my life, that I wasn't confused or lost, as Stephen wanted to make people believe. I put everything in a cloth bag. I left it ready by the door. I barely slept that night. I tossed and turned, thinking about what I would say, how I would explain what was happening, wondering if the lawyer would believe me or see me as a paranoid old woman. On Monday, I got up at 6 in the morning. I showered with hot water until my skin was red. I put on my best dress, a gray one with small flowers that I used for special occasions. I put on a little makeup, just a little powder on my cheeks and pale pink lipstick. I wanted to look dignified, presentable, not like a woman who was losing her mind. Mr. Wallace's office was downtown. I took 2 buses to get there, the first at 8, the second at 9. I arrived 15 minutes early. The building was old, 3 stories, with peeling cream-colored paint. I climbed the stairs slowly. My knees protested on every step. The office was on the 2nd floor. A wooden door with a brass plaque that read Arthur Wallace, attorney at law. I knocked twice. A voice from inside told me to come in. Mr. Wallace was a man in his 60s. Gray hair, thick glasses, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His desk was covered in stacked files. It smelled like old coffee and paper. Mrs. Mendez. Sit down. I sat in a plastic chair in front of his desk. I put the bag with my documents on my lap. The lawyer looked at me attentively, without rushing, without judgment. Tell me what's wrong. And I told him. From the beginning. From the phone call I overheard. From Stephen's visit with the truck. From the nursing home threats. From the social worker. I told him everything without crying, with a steady voice, as if I were narrating someone else's life. When I finished, Mr. Wallace took off his glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief. Then he looked me straight in the eye. Your son wants your money, and he wants the house. That's clear. The conservatorship is the legal way to get it. If a judge declares him your guardian, he can sell your property, manage your pension, and you won't be able to do anything. That can happen. It can, but it's not going to. He took out a notepad and started writing. You are lucid, coherent. You can make decisions. That's already an advantage. Now we need to build a solid defense. First, we're going to get a medical certificate proving you are in full command of your mental faculties. Second, we're going to draft a will where you specify what you want done with your assets. Third, we're going to prepare a revocable power of attorney where you designate someone you trust, not your son, to represent you if you need it in the future. But I don't have anyone else. I only have Stephen. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. Nobody? No friends? No distant relatives? I thought of Carmen. I thought of the few people who still said hello to me on the street, but no one was close enough. All right, we can designate a public defender for now. Or myself, if you trust me. I trust you. Then let's start. This is going to cost money, Mrs. Mendez. My fee is $500 for the whole case, plus the costs of the medical certificate and the notary. In total, about $800. $800. More than I earned in a month. But I had no choice. I can pay it. I have savings. Good. I'll draft the documents today. Tomorrow, I'll take you to a doctor I trust. And by Wednesday, your son will receive a notification that you are legally protected. I left that office feeling something strange in my chest. It wasn't happiness. Not yet. It was relief. The feeling that someone was finally on my side. But when I got home, the feeling disappeared because Stephen was at the gate, waiting for me, with his arms crossed and his face red with anger. "Where were you?" His voice was a growl, not a question, an accusation. I was out. Out where? That's none of your business. Stephen took a step toward me. He was shaking, with rage, with impotence. "Everything is my business, Mom, because you can't take care of yourself anymore. You're doing crazy things. I talked to Mrs. Peterson yesterday. She told me you went to her house, that she gave you the number of a lawyer. What are you planning? Carmen?" My only ally had betrayed me. Or maybe Stephen had pressured her, intimidated her. I didn't know. But the damage was done. I'm protecting what's mine. You have nothing to protect. Everything you have, I gave you. I've been paying for this house for the last 10 years when you couldn't work anymore. That's a lie. It's not a lie. I checked the receipts. They're in your name, yes. But I made the deposits. I paid the mortgage when you ran out of money. So this house is mine too. I felt the earth open up beneath my feet. It couldn't be true. I had paid for the house. Ernest and I. For 30 years. You're lying. Stephen took out his phone and showed me the screen. They were screenshots of bank transfers, of deposits made to the mortgage bank's name, with dates from the last few years, with amounts of $400 a month. See? I paid, not you. So if you want to play hardball, I can play that game too. I'm going to prove that you didn't pay for this house, that I did, and I'm going to demand my share. It wasn't possible. I didn't remember Stephen paying for anything, but my memory of the last few years was confused. There were months when the money wasn't enough, months when I didn't know how I was going to pay, and Stephen had shown up with envelopes of money, saying it was a gift. Not to worry. It had been a trap. It had all been a trap from the beginning. Stephen put his phone away and looked at me with contempt. "You have two options, Mom. Either you come live with us the easy way, or we start a legal process where everyone will find out that your son had to support you because you couldn't do it yourself. What do you prefer? The easy way or public humiliation?" I stayed silent. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to defend myself. Stephen smiled. A cruel smile. The smile of someone who knows they've won. "Think it over. I'll give you until Friday. If you don't agree by Friday, I'm starting the conservatorship process, and I promise you I'm going to win." He left, got in his car and sped off, tires screeching against the asphalt. I stood there, clinging to my bag of documents, feeling everything I had built that morning fall apart. I entered my house like a zombie. I left the bag on the table. I sat on the sofa, and I stared at the wall, without thinking, without feeling, just breathing. I don't know how much time passed. Maybe an hour, maybe 2, until I heard a knock on the door. It wasn't Stephen. The knock was soft, timid. I got up and opened it. It was a young man in his 30s with dirty work clothes and a baseball cap. He had dark eyes and a scar on his left cheek. "Mrs. Helen?" "Yes? I don't know if you remember me. I'm Manny Trevino. You helped me many years ago when I was a kid." I searched my memory. Manny Trevino. The name sounded distant, like an echo from another life. My mother worked cleaning houses, like you. She got sick with cancer when I was 12. You lent her money for the treatment, $2,000. We were never able to pay you back. My mother died the next year. I was left alone. I went to live with an uncle. I lost touch with you. I started to remember. A thin woman with sad eyes who worked with me in the houses. Her name was Hortensia Trevino. She had died young, 42, left a son, a quiet boy with big eyes. "Manny." "Yes, ma'am. That's me. A few days ago, I came looking for you. I wanted to pay you back the money, with interest. But when I got here, I saw your son yelling at you at the gate. I heard what he was saying, and I decided to stay close, to make sure you were okay. Why? Because you saved my mother. You gave her 6 more months of life. 6 months where she could say goodbye to me. Prepare me. Tell me she loved me. That's priceless, and I owe you everything." Manny put his hand in his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Here's the $2,000, plus $2,000 in interest. It's $4,000 in total. I know it's not much after so many years, but it's what I could save." I tried to refuse, but he insisted. He put the envelope in my hands firmly. "And there's something else, ma'am. I work as a truck driver. I know people, lawyers, accountants, people who can help you. If you'll let me, I want to be your ally in this. I want to help you fight against your son, because you don't deserve this." The tears I had held back all morning finally came. I couldn't stop them. Manny hugged me as if I were his own mother, and I cried on his shoulder. I cried from relief, from gratitude, from hope. Manny came into my house and sat in the living room. I made coffee with trembling hands. I still couldn't believe he was here, that someone had come to help me without me even asking. After so many years of loneliness, of feeling invisible, someone saw me. I put the cups on the table. Manny took his and drank a long sip. Then he looked at me seriously. "Mrs. Helen, I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. To help you, I have to know exactly what's happening." And I told him. Again. The same story I had told Mr. Wallace, but this time I added more details. I told him about the deposits Stephen claimed to have made, about the threat to prove he had paid for the house, about my fear that it was true. Manny listened in silence. When I finished, he sat thinking. His fingers drummed on the table. Then he spoke. "This money he says he deposited. Do you have the bank statements?" "No. I only keep the payment receipts. I never asked for the full statements. We need to get them. Tomorrow, we'll go to the bank and request the complete payment history for the mortgage. All the transactions. If Stephen really paid, it will be registered. But everything you paid for 30 years will also be registered. And that's what matters." He was right. I had paid for 3 decades. Stephen only for the last few years. That had to count for something. "There's something else, ma'am. Stephen mentioned he's going to start a conservatorship process. To do that, he needs to prove you're not in a condition to care for yourself. He's going to try to get medical reports, witness statements from neighbors, anything to back him up. We have to get ahead of him." Mr. Wallace said the same thing. That I need a medical certificate. Exactly. But not just that. We need witnesses who will testify in your favor. People who will say you're fine, that you're independent, that you can make decisions. I don't have anyone. Only Carmen. And she already told Stephen I went to see her. Manny shook his head. "You have more people than you think." "I'll testify. And I know others. People from the neighborhood who know you, who have seen you for years, walking alone, doing your shopping, living your life. They can help." I felt overwhelmed. This man, this stranger who was a boy the last time I saw him, was willing to fight for me. More than my own son ever had. "Why are you doing this, Manny, after all these years?" "Why?" He smiled. A sad smile. "Because my mother taught me that debts of the heart are the most important, and because I see my mother in you, alone, vulnerable, being attacked by people who should be protecting her. I'm not going to stand by and do nothing." That night, Manny stayed late. We made a list of everything we needed to do. First, go to the bank. Second, get the medical certificate. Third, talk to Mr. Wallace and show him the $4,000. Fourth, find witnesses. Fifth, prepare a strategy for when Stephen returned on Friday. When Manny left, it was almost 11 at night. I sat in the living room, looking at the envelope with the money. $4,000. Enough to pay the lawyer and have a safety cushion. Enough to feel less helpless. On Tuesday morning, Manny arrived at 9 o'clock sharp. He brought his truck, an old red pickup with a dented bumper. He helped me in and drove to the bank. The branch was crowded. We waited 40 minutes before we were helped. When it was finally our turn, a young woman in a blue uniform asked us to sit at her desk. "How can I help you? I need the complete payment history for my mortgage, from when the account was opened until today." The young woman typed something into her computer. Full name and account number. I gave her the information. She kept typing. Then she frowned. "Ma'am, this account is closed. The mortgage was paid off 3 years ago." "What?" "Your house has no more debt. It was paid in full in March of 2022. I felt the air leave my lungs. The mortgage was paid. Completely. For 3 years. Stephen had lied. He wasn't paying anything. There was no debt he could claim. Can you give me the records of that payoff? Who made the final payment?" The woman typed again. The final payment was made by Mrs. Helen Mendez, with a withdrawal from her savings account. $16,000. $16,000. I had paid off the house completely, with my savings. Savings I had gathered my entire life. And I had forgotten. My memory had failed me. But the records don't lie. Can you print all of that? The complete history. Yes, ma'am. It will cost $10 for the service. Pay her, I told Manny. He took out the money and paid. 10 minutes later, we had a thick folder with all the documents. 30 years of payments, and the final receipt proving that I, not Stephen, had paid off the debt. We left the bank in silence. Manny drove to a nearby diner. He ordered 2 coffees, and we sat by the window. "Stephen lied," I said. "Yes, he lied. He probably showed you fake screenshots, or deposits he made for other things. Not for the mortgage. But the important thing is that now we have the truth. Documented. Signed by the bank." I opened the folder and looked at the papers. Every payment was registered. Every cent Ernest and I had sacrificed was there. In ink. Permanent. This changes everything. Yes. But we can't get complacent. Stephen will try to attack from another angle. The conservatorship is still a threat. We need to keep building your defense. That afternoon, we went to Mr. Wallace. We showed him the bank documents. He reviewed them carefully, page by page. When he finished, he took off his glasses and smiled. "This is pure gold. With this, your son can't claim the house. He has no legal basis. The property is yours, completely. But he can still ask for conservatorship." "Yes, but we're going to make it difficult for him. Tomorrow, I'll take you to the doctor. A psychiatrist I trust. He'll evaluate your mental state and issue a certificate. With that, plus these documents, plus the witnesses that young Manny is going to find, your son is going to have to fight very hard, and he'll probably lose." We left the lawyer's office with a clear plan. Manny drove me back home. Before I got out, he took my hand. "Mrs. Helen, there's something else I need to tell you." "What?" "I didn't just come because I owed my mother. I came because I investigated your son. I have a friend who works at the courthouse. He told me that Stephen already started the conservatorship process. 2 weeks ago, before the social worker's visit, before everything, he had this planned for a while. I felt a pit in my stomach. So the social worker didn't come because Stephen was worried. She came because he had already started the legal process." "Exactly. And there's more. Stephen submitted false documents to the court. He says you suffer from dementia, that you forget to eat, that you leave the stove on, that you get lost in the street. All lies. But if the judge doesn't have proof to the contrary, he might believe him." "How did you get that information?" "My friend let me see the file. He shouldn't have. But he also has an elderly mother, and it hurt him to read what your son wrote about you. So he helped me. We have to take this information to Mr. Wallace." "I already did. He's going to request an official copy of the file tomorrow, and he's going to file a countersuit for defamation and legal abuse." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Stephen didn't just want to take my house and my money. He was also destroying my reputation, telling lies about me so a judge would declare me incompetent. Manny squeezed my hand. "You're not alone, ma'am. I'm going to be here, and we're going to win. I promise you." On Wednesday, I went with Mr. Wallace to see the psychiatrist. He was a man in his 50s, bald, with a soft voice. He asked me many questions. What day was it? Who was the president? How much was 7 + 8? What did I have for breakfast? Where did I live? How many children did I have? I answered everything correctly. Then he gave me memory tests. He showed me drawings and asked me to remember them 5 minutes later. He had me solve simple math problems. He asked me to write a complete sentence. I passed everything. At the end of the evaluation, the doctor smiled at me. "Mrs. Mendez, you are perfectly lucid. There is no sign of dementia or cognitive decline. I'll issue the certificate today." I left that appointment feeling a small but important victory. I had the paper that proved I was fine, that Stephen was lying. On Thursday, Manny brought 3 people to my house. They were neighbors from the neighborhood. People who knew me by sight. One was the owner of the corner store. Another was the mailman who delivered my mail. The third was a woman who lived 2 houses down and always said hello when she saw me. Mr. Wallace took statements from all of them. They said they saw me regularly, that I was always well-dressed and oriented, that I did my shopping alone, that I paid my bills on time, that they had never seen me confused or lost. They were simple testimonies, but they were true, and they were powerful. Friday arrived. It was the day Stephen had said he would return, the day of the ultimatum. I was prepared. I had all the documents organized on the table, the bank history, the medical certificate, the witness statements, everything. At 10 in the morning, I heard a car. It was Stephen, and he was with Jessica. Again, they knocked on the door. I opened it. Stephen walked in without asking permission. Jessica stayed behind, watching with those cold eyes. "Well, Mom, have you decided?" "Yes, Stephen, I've decided. And? I'm not leaving. I'm not going to live with you. And you're not going to take my house." Stephen let out a dry laugh. "We'll see about that." I smiled. A calm smile. And I handed him an envelope. "What's this? Open it." Stephen opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of the bank history. His eyes scanned the pages. His face turned pale. "How did you get this?" "I went to the bank, and I found out you lied. The house is paid off, has been for 3 years. With my money, not yours." Stephen crumpled the papers in anger. "This doesn't change anything. I'm still going to get the conservatorship." I took out another envelope. I gave it to him. "This is the medical certificate, from a certified psychiatrist. It says I'm perfectly fine." Stephen opened it. "Read it." His jaw tensed. "And this," I said, handing him a third envelope, "are the witness statements confirming I am independent and capable." Stephen threw the papers on the floor. "I don't care. I'm going to fight this to the end. Do it. But you're also going to receive a countersuit for defamation, because you lied to the court, and that's a crime." Stephen looked at me with pure hatred. Jessica stepped closer and put a hand on his shoulder. "Let's go. This isn't worth it." And they left. Without saying goodbye, without looking back, leaving the papers scattered on the floor, I closed the door. And for the first time in weeks, I took a deep breath. After Stephen left, I stood in the middle of the living room, looking at the papers scattered on the floor. I didn't pick them up right away. I left them there as evidence, as a reminder that the battle was just beginning. Stephen had come with arrogance and left with rage. And the rage of a cornered man is dangerous. Manny arrived half an hour later. He had arranged to come by to make sure everything was okay. When he saw the documents on the floor, he picked them up carefully and put them on the table. How did he react? With fury. He said he's going to fight to the end. He will. But now, so will we. And we have better weapons. We sat in the kitchen. Manny took out a small notebook and began to write. "Mrs. Helen, we need to think several steps ahead. Stephen is going to try to discredit you in other ways. He might talk to neighbors. He might invent stories. He might even try to provoke situations that make you look bad. We have to protect you from all that. How? First, we're going to install a camera at the entrance of your house. If Stephen comes back and makes a scene, it will be recorded. Second, you're going to start keeping a journal. You'll write down everything. Every day, what you did, where you went, who you spoke to. That will prove your mind is clear and your life is orderly. Third, we're going to open a new bank account, just in your name. And we'll transfer your pension there. That way Stephen can't track your financial movements. All of that sounded complicated, but necessary. I can do that. You're not alone. I'm going to help you with every step." That same afternoon, Manny brought a small camera. He installed it above the front door. It pointed directly at the gate and the entrance. Anyone who came would be recorded. He showed me how to view it on my phone. It was simple. I just had to open an app, and there was the image in real time. He also bought me a new notebook, hardcover, green. On the first page, I wrote Helen Mendez's journal, and below it, the date, Thursday, October 23rd, 2025. In that first entry, I wrote everything that had happened in the last few days, from Stephen's call to his visit today. I wrote with a shaky but clear hand. Every word was a piece of my defense. Every line was my voice. On Friday, Manny took me to the bank again. We opened a new account, just in my name. No beneficiaries. No authorizations for anyone else. We requested that my pension be deposited directly there starting next month. The woman at the bank explained the change would take about 15 days. But after that, everything would go to the new account. Now your son can't access your money, Manny said as we left the bank. Even if he gets the conservatorship, he'll have to fight for every cent. I felt safer, more protected. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my own life. On Saturday morning, Mr. Wallace called me on the phone. Mrs. Mendez, I have news. The court has accepted our countersuit. Stephen was notified yesterday. And furthermore, the judge assigned to the conservatorship case has requested a hearing. He's going to hear from both sides before making any decision. That's good for us. It means he won't decide based solely on the papers Stephen submitted. When is the hearing? In 2 weeks, November 8th. You have to be there, well-dressed, calm, answering clearly. It will be your chance to prove that Stephen is lying. I'll be ready. And I mean it, ma'am. No nerves, no tears, just facts, just the truth. The judge needs to see a capable woman in you, not a fragile victim. I understand. I hung up the phone and sat down to think. 2 weeks. 14 days to prepare, to make sure that when I was in front of that judge, he would see me for what I really was. A 71-year-old woman who still had strength, who could still make decisions, who still deserved respect. Manny came that afternoon. He brought food, roasted chicken and rice. We ate together in the kitchen. It was strange. It had been years since I'd shared a meal with someone. Since Ernest died, I always ate alone. But with Manny there, the kitchen felt less empty, less cold. You need to practice for the hearing, he said, serving more rice onto my plate. The lawyer is right. You have to be calm. You have to answer without hesitating, without breaking down. How do I practice that? I'll ask you questions, the same ones the judge might ask you, and you'll answer, over and over, until the answers come out naturally. And so we did. Every afternoon for the next few days, Manny would come over and ask me questions. What is your full name? How old are you? Where do you live? How long have you lived there? Who paid for the house? Your son says you can't take care of yourself. What proof do you have that he's lying? At first I stumbled. I got nervous. I forgot details. But with each repetition, the answers became firmer, clearer, more confident. On Sunday, I went to church. I hadn't gone in months, but I felt like I needed to be there. I needed a moment of peace. The church was full. I sat in the last pew. I listened to the pastor talk about forgiveness, about letting go of resentment, about trusting that divine justice always comes. But I didn't want divine justice. I wanted human justice. I wanted Stephen to pay for what he was doing. I wanted the world to know what kind of son he was. As I was leaving the church, a woman approached me. She was older than me, 80 perhaps. She walked with a cane. Helen Mendez? Yes, I'm Joanne Adams. I worked with you many years ago. Cleaning houses, Joanne. I remembered her. A small woman with a loud laugh. We had worked together at a rich family's house. She cleaned the bathrooms. I cleaned the bedrooms. Joanne? How long has it been? She smiled. I heard what your son is doing. People talk. This is a small town. We all know everything. I felt ashamed. I didn't want people to know. I didn't want to be the neighbor's topic of conversation. Don't be ashamed, Joanne said, as if reading my mind. You're not the first mother a son has done this to, and you won't be the last. But I want you to know, if you need witnesses, I'll speak for you. I'll tell the judge I've known you for 50 years. That you were always hardworking, honest, strong, that you don't deserve this." The tears came without permission. Joanne hugged me. She smelled like lavender and talcum powder. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Just fight. And win." That same afternoon, Mr. Wallace came to my house. He brought more documents, papers for me to sign. Sworn affidavits, authorizations, all the legal paperwork needed for the hearing. He also brought me a copy of the files Stephen had submitted to the court. I read it with a racing heart. Every line was a lie. It said I left the doors unlocked, that I forgot to turn off the stove, that I went out on the street in my bathrobe, that I talked to myself, that I confused people, that I got lost in my own neighborhood. None of it was true, but it was there, in writing, signed by Stephen, submitted to a judge. How can he lie like this? Mr. Wallace closed the folder because he wants to win, and he knows that if he can't prove you're unwell, he loses everything. The house, the money, the control. That's why he's willing to destroy your reputation. We're going to prove he's lying. Yes, but you have to be prepared. At the hearing, Stephen is going to say horrible things. He's going to invent stories. He's going to try to make you look bad. You can't react. You can't scream at him. You can't cry. You just have to calmly tell the truth. The judge will notice the difference. The days passed slowly. Every morning I got up early. I showered, got dressed, ate breakfast, wrote in my journal, did my housework, watered the plants, swept the patio. I documented everything. I wrote it all down. Manny came every day. Sometimes he brought food. Sometimes he just came to sit with me, to keep me company, to remind me I wasn't alone. One afternoon, while we were having coffee, he asked me something no one had asked before. "Mrs. Helen, if you win this case, if you manage to get Stephen to stay away, what are you going to do next? How are you going to live?" I had never thought about it. I had always been focused on surviving, on defending myself, but I had never thought about what would come after. I don't know. You need to know, because that's what will give you strength. You have to have something to fight for, something you want to do, something that excites you. I thought about it. What excited me? It had been so long since I'd felt excitement for anything, just fatigue, just sadness, just routine. But there was something small, something I had dreamed of years ago and never did. I always wanted to learn how to drive. Manny smiled. "Then that's what it will be. When you win, you're going to learn to drive. I'll teach you." That promise stayed with me. It became my motivation, my light at the end of the tunnel. I wasn't just going to win this battle. I was also going to live, really live, for the first time in a long time. On Wednesday, a week before the hearing, I received a letter. It was from Stephen. I opened it with trembling hands. "Mom," it said, "I know things are tense between us, but it doesn't have to be this way. We can still fix this. If you agree to come live with us, I'll drop the lawsuit. We'll forget everything. Start over. Think about it. You still have time. Your son who loves you, Stephen." It was a trap. I knew it immediately. Stephen was losing. He knew he had a weak case for the hearing. That's why he was offering peace now. But it wasn't peace. It was surrender. It was handing him everything without a fight. I tore up the letter. I threw it in the trash. And I continued to prepare. On Thursday, Mr. Wallace took me to buy new clothes. A simple beige dress, black low-heeled shoes, a light brown cardigan. Nothing flashy, nothing extravagant, just dignified clothes. The clothes of a woman who respects herself. On Friday, 2 days before the hearing, Manny brought Joanne to my house. The lawyer was there too. Joanne gave her official testimony. She talked about how she knew me, about the years we worked together, that she had always seen me as capable, independent, lucid. When she finished, the lawyer had a smile on his face. "With this, Mrs. Mendez, Stephen has nothing, absolutely nothing. On Saturday, I rested. I did nothing but sit on the patio and look at the sky. It was cold. November had arrived with wind and gray clouds, but I felt strangely calm. On Sunday, the day before the hearing, I went to church again. This time I didn't sit in the back. I sat up front. I closed my eyes and prayed. I didn't pray to win. I prayed for strength, for clarity, for dignity. When I left the church, Manny was waiting for me outside. Ready for tomorrow? Ready. On Monday, November 8th, I woke up at 5 in the morning. I hadn't slept well. I spent the night tossing and turning, reviewing every answer, every document, every detail. But when I opened my eyes and saw the gray light of dawn coming through the window, I knew it was time. Today would define everything. I showered with hot water. I put on the beige dress I had bought, the black shoes, the brown cardigan. I combed my hair carefully. I put on minimal makeup, just powder and pink lipstick. I wanted to look like what I was, a dignified woman, a capable woman. Manny arrived at 7. He brought coffee and donuts. We ate breakfast in silence. I could barely eat. My stomach felt heavy as a stone. "You have the truth on your side," Manny said, "and that's stronger than any lie." At 8:30, we left for the courthouse. Mr. Wallace was waiting for us at the entrance. He wore a dark suit and a red tie. He looked serious. Professional? Remember, Mrs. Mendez. Calmness, clarity, truth, nothing more. We entered the building. It was large, cold, with marble floors that echoed with every step. We went up to the second floor. The courtroom was small. There were wooden benches, a large desk at the front where the judge would sit, and 2 tables, one for us, one for Stephen. We sat down, me in the middle, the lawyer to my right, Manny to my left. We waited. At 9 o'clock sharp, Stephen walked in. He came with Jessica and his own lawyer, a tall man in a gray suit with a leather briefcase. Stephen didn't look at me. He sat at his table with his back to me. Jessica did look at me, with contempt, with coldness. 5 minutes later, the judge entered. He was a man in his 60s, white hair, thick glasses. He sat down and banged a small gavel on the desk. Hearing in the case of Mendez versus Mendez. Petition for conservatorship. The petitioner may proceed. Stephen's lawyer stood up. He spoke with a loud, clear voice. "Your Honor, my client, Stephen Mendez, requests conservatorship of his mother, Helen Mendez, age 71, due to cognitive decline and lack of capacity to make decisions. We present evidence that Mrs. Mendez is living in precarious conditions, cannot manage her finances, and represents a danger to herself, lie after lie." But the lawyer said them with such confidence that they sounded true. "What evidence do you present?" Testimonies from neighbors who have seen Mrs. Mendez confused, reports that she leaves the stove on, unpaid bills, and a report from the social worker who visited the home. Mr. Wallace stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. Those testimonies are anonymous and unverifiable. The bills are all paid on time, as we will demonstrate, and the social worker did not issue any negative report." The judge looked at the documents. "Do you have copies of these anonymous testimonies?" "Yes, Your Honor," Stephen's lawyer said, handing over some sheets. The judge reviewed them, frowning. "These testimonies are not signed. They have no legal value. What else do you have?" Stephen's lawyer hesitated. "We have the direct testimony of my client, Your Honor. He can testify about his mother's condition." "Proceed." Stephen stood up. He walked to the front. The judge asked him to swear to tell the truth. Stephen swore. Then he began to speak. "My mother isn't the same anymore, Your Honor. She forgets things. She repeats questions. She can't take care of herself. I just want what's best for her to be safe, for her to be protected." His voice sounded sad, convincing, almost believable. "But I knew every word was a lie, Mr." Wallace stood up to cross-examine him. "Mr. Mendez, when was the last time you visited your mother before initiating this process?" Stephen hesitated. "A few weeks ago." "How many weeks?" "You don't remember exactly. It was more than a month, wasn't it?" "Maybe." "And in that visit, Did you notice any strange behavior? She was. Distracted. Distracted or lucid? Distracted, Mr. Wallace pulled out a paper. I have here the call log between you and your mother for the last 6 months. Only 3 calls. All initiated by her, none by you. Is that the behavior of a worried son? Stephen pressed his lips together. I was busy. Too busy to call your mother, but not too busy to start a legal process to take her house. Objection, shouted Stephen's lawyer. Speculation. Withdrawn, said Mr. Wallace. Mr. Mendez, is it true that you told your mother the house was paid for with your money? Yes. And is it true that you showed her alleged proof of bank deposits? Yes. Because I did pay. Mr. Wallace pulled out another document. This is the official history from the mortgage bank. It shows that Mrs. Helen Mendez paid off the mortgage in March of 2022 with $16,000 from her own savings account. There are no deposits made by you. You lied to your mother. Stephen's lawyer stood up. Objection. He's attacking my client's character. I am establishing a pattern of deceit, Your Honor, which is relevant to this case. Overruled. Continue. Stephen was red, sweating. He looked nervous. Mr. Mendez, did you submit false documents to this court claiming your mother suffers from dementia? They're not false. She has problems. We have a medical certificate from a certified psychiatrist that says otherwise. Did you review that certificate before filing your petition? No. Why not? Because I know how my mother is. Or because it wasn't convenient for you to know the truth. Stephen didn't answer. Mr. Wallace let him go. Stephen returned to his seat, shaking. Now it was my turn. The judge called me. Mrs. Mendez, please approach. I stood up slowly. I walked to the front. My legs were trembling, but I held myself steady. I swore to tell the truth, and I sat down. The judge looked me straight in the eye. Mrs. Mendez, how old are you? 71, Your Honor. Where do you live? At 122 Maple Street. How long have you lived there? For 42 years. Who paid for that house? My husband and I. For 30 years. And I finished paying it off 3 years ago. With what money? With my savings. $16,000 I saved from working my whole life. Your son says you cannot take care of yourself. Is that true? No, Your Honor. I cook. I clean. I do my shopping. I pay my bills. I live independently. Why do you believe your son initiated this process? I fell silent. I took a deep breath. And I told the truth. Because he wants my money, my pension, my house. And the only way he can get it is by declaring me incompetent. The judge wrote something down. Then he asked me more questions. What day was it? Who was the president? How much was 15 plus 20? What had I eaten for breakfast? I answered everything correctly. Without hesitating. Without trembling. You may step down, Mrs. Mendez. I returned to my seat. Manny squeezed my hand. The lawyer smiled slightly. The judge reviewed all the documents. The medical certificate. The witness statements. The bank history. The paid bills. Everything. Finally, he spoke. I have reviewed the evidence presented by both parties. The petition for conservatorship is based on unproven claims that are contradicted by solid medical and testimonial evidence. Mrs. Helen Mendez has demonstrated that she is in full command of her mental and physical faculties. There is no legal basis to grant this conservatorship. The petition is denied. He banged the gavel. Furthermore, I am ordering Mr. Stephen Mendez to refrain from contacting or harassing his mother, under penalty of a restraining order. This hearing is concluded. Stephen jumped up, shouting, "This is unfair. She can't take care of herself. She's going to end up dead in that house." The judge looked at him sternly. "Mr. Mendez, control yourself, or I will find you in contempt." Stephen stormed out of the courtroom, furious. Jessica followed him, without looking at me, without saying anything. I just sat there, shaking, crying. But this time, from relief. I had won. We left the courthouse under a cold November Sunday. My legs could barely hold me. Manny took my arm. Mr. Wallace walked on my other side with a discreet smile on his face. "You did very well, Mrs. Mendez. Perfectly." I couldn't speak. The words were stuck in my throat. I just nodded. I was still shaking. But it was a different kind of shaking. It wasn't fear. It was liberation. When we got to Manny's truck, I finally let it all out. I cried. I cried as I hadn't in years. Manny hugged me. He let me soak his shoulder. He didn't say anything. He was just there. The lawyer said goodbye in the parking lot. The judge was very clear. Stephen is forbidden from approaching you. If he does, call me immediately, and we'll request a formal restraining order. But I think he got the message. He lost. And he knows it. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. For everything. That's what I'm here for. And remember, anything you need, you call me. He left in his old car. Manny and I sat there in silence for several minutes. Do you want to go home? Not yet. Give me a moment. I needed to process what had happened. I had won. Stephen couldn't touch me. He couldn't take my house. He couldn't control me. For the first time in months, I was free. Manny took me to a small coffee shop nearby. He ordered 2 hot chocolates and donuts. We sat by the window. How do you feel? I don't know. I still can't believe it. Believe it. You fought. And you won. That's real. I drank the hot chocolate slowly. It was sweet and warm. It burned my tongue a little. But I didn't care. I felt alive. What happens now? Now we live. That's what happens. You go on with your life. And Stephen goes on with his. Far away from you. But it didn't end there. I knew it didn't. Stephen wasn't the type to accept defeat. He was going to try something else. I knew him too well. That same afternoon, when I got home, I found something strange. The camera Manny had installed showed that someone had been at my gate. At 11 in the morning, while I was at the hearing, I checked the recording. It was Jessica, alone. She had rung the bell. She had waited. Then she left something in the mailbox and left. I went out to check. There was an envelope in the mailbox. I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was Jessica's. Helen, it said, you won this battle. Congratulations. But this isn't over. Stephen is devastated. You humiliated him in front of a judge. You made him look like a liar, like a thief. He won't forget that. Neither will I. You think you're so smart? That you beat us. But life is long, and things change. We'll see who has the last laugh. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. It was a threat. Clear. Direct. I showed the letter to Manny when he came over that night. He read it with a frown. This is harassment. We can report it. I don't want any more courtrooms. I don't want any more fights. I just want to be left alone. Then we'll keep this as evidence, just in case. Just in case. Those words haunted me all night. The following days were strange. I expected to feel peace. I expected to feel calm. But I couldn't. Every noise made me jump. Every car that passed my house made me nervous. I checked the camera constantly, waiting to see Stephen, waiting to see Jessica, waiting for the next attack. But nothing came. A week passed. Then 2. The silence was deafening. Manny kept coming every day. He brought me food. He kept me company. And he kept his promise. He started teaching me to drive. The first time I sat behind the wheel of his truck, my hands were shaking so much I couldn't hold the steering wheel. But he was patient. He explained every pedal, every gear shift, every mirror. Slowly, Mrs. Helen. There's no rush. Like that. Very good. I drove down the empty street in front of my house. 5 yards. 10, 20. Then I braked too hard and almost hit my head on the steering wheel. But I had done it. I had driven. We practiced every afternoon for 2 weeks. Little by little, I got better. My hands stopped shaking. My foot found the brake without thinking. I started to enjoy it. The feeling of movement, of control, of freedom. But then it happened. It was a Tuesday afternoon. 3 weeks after the hearing, I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard loud banging on the door. It wasn't the doorbell. It was fists pounding on the wood. I opened it slowly. It was Stephen, but it wasn't the usual Stephen. His eyes were red. His hair was a mess. His clothes were wrinkled. He smelled like alcohol. "You," he said, pointing at me. "You ruined me." "Stephen." "Go. You can't be here. I don't care about the judge. I don't care about anything." Jessica left me. She left me because she says I'm a failure, that I couldn't even handle my own old mother. He pushed the door and came in. I backed away. I was scared. This wasn't the manipulative, cold Stephen. This was a broken Stephen. Desperate. Dangerous. "You lost your job, Stephen?" "Yeah. I got fired. Because the scandal from the trial reached the company. They said they couldn't have employees with legal problems, all because of you. My fault? Because I defended myself? Because I didn't let you take everything from me?" Stephen moved closer. He raised his hand. I thought he was going to hit me. I closed my eyes, but the blow never came. I heard another voice. It was Manny. He had come in through the door Stephen left open. "Get away from her." Stephen spun around. "Who the hell are you? Her little boyfriend? You ridiculous old woman." Manny got between Stephen and me. "I'm someone who cares about her. And you're going to leave right now. Or I'm calling the police." Stephen let out a bitter laugh. "The police. Everyone's against me. My own mother betrayed me. And now she has bodyguards." Manny took out his phone. "Last chance. Leave." Stephen looked at him with hatred, but he finally gave up. He took a step back, then another. "This isn't over, Mom. Someday you'll need me. And that day, I won't be there." And he left. He stumbled to his car and peeled out, tires screeching. Manny locked the door. He hugged me. I was shaking again. It's over. He's gone. But it wasn't over. Because the next day, I got another visit. This time from the police. 2 officers knocked on my door at 9 in the morning. "Mrs. Helen Mendez?" "Yes. We received a complaint. Your son, Stephen Mendez, reported that you threatened him yesterday, that you told him you were going to burn him alive while he slept." My mouth fell open, but no sound came out. Stephen was making things up again, trying to make me look crazy. Dangerous. That's a lie. He came to my house drunk. He threatened me. And there's a witness. "Who?" "Manny Trevino. He was here. He saw everything." The officers wrote down the name. They asked me more questions. I told them everything. I showed them Jessica's letter. I showed them the camera footage where you could see Stephen entering violently. "We'll investigate. If your version is confirmed, your son could face charges for violating a court order and filing a false report." They left. I was left shaking. Manny arrived half an hour later. When I told him, he was furious. "This has to end. I'm going to go talk to him." "No, please. It will only make things worse. Mrs. Helen, he's not going to stop. Not until someone really stops him." That afternoon, Mr. Wallace called me. "Mrs. Mendez, I heard what happened. We're going to request a permanent restraining order against your son, and we're going to press charges for harassment and threats. This ends now." 2 days later, Stephen was arrested, just for a few hours, but it was enough. When he got out, he had a restraining order that prohibited him from coming within 200 yards of me. If he did, he would go to jail. He was also fined $5,000 for filing a false report, money he didn't have. Because Jessica was gone, because he had lost his job, because he had lost everything, and I, finally, could breathe. 3 months passed since the restraining order. 3 months of silence. 3 months without Stephen. No calls, no visits, no threats. At first, I couldn't believe it. Every morning I woke up expecting something bad to happen, but nothing happened, just peace. Manny kept coming every day, not just to protect me anymore, but to accompany me, to share life with me. We ate breakfast together. He taught me to drive. I cooked him his favorite meals. We had become family, not by blood, but by choice, and that was stronger. In February, I got my driver's license. At 71 years old, Manny took me to the test. He was more nervous than I was. When I came out with the paper in my hand, he hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You did it, Mrs. Helen. You did it." We both cried. From happiness. From pride. from freedom. With my license in hand, Manny helped me buy a car. Nothing fancy, a small, used white sedan. It cost $3,500. I paid for it with the money I had left over after all the legal expenses. The first time I drove alone was a Sunday in March. I left early. I drove around the neighborhood, then onto the highway, toward the lake that was 20 miles from the city. Ernest and I used to go there when we were young, before life became so heavy. I parked by the water. I got out of the car. The air smelled like damp earth and pine. There were ducks swimming near the shore, families having picnics, children running. I sat on a wooden bench. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt something like happiness. It wasn't euphoria. It wasn't overwhelming emotion. It was something deeper. It was peace. It was the certainty that I had survived, that I had fought, that I had won. I took my journal out of my bag. I had brought it with me. I opened to a blank page and wrote, "Today I drove to the lake by myself. Today I felt free. Today I understood that my life didn't end when Stephen betrayed me. It just started over. I'm 71 years old. But I'm still here. I'm still able. I'm still worthy." When I got home that afternoon, there was a letter in the mailbox. I tensed up, but when I opened it, I saw it wasn't from Stephen. It was from Joanne, my old friend. "Helen," it said, "I heard you learned to drive. I'm proud of you. If you ever want to go out for coffee, let me know. There's still life to live. Your friend, Joanne." I smiled. Yes, there was still life to live. The following months were different. I started going out more, visiting Joanne, going to the market not because I had to, but because I wanted to, driving to places I had never known, nearby towns, overlooks, long, empty roads where I could think. Manny got a better job. As a supervisor at a transportation company, he earned more. But he still came to see me. Now he brought his girlfriend, a sweet young woman who treated me with respect, with kindness. She called me Mrs. Helen. And when she looked at me, she didn't see an old woman. She saw a person. In May, I received a call from Mr. Wallace. "Mrs. Mendez, I have news. Stephen has requested to lift the restraining order. He says he wants to talk to you, that he wants to apologize. What do you say?" I felt a knot in my stomach. Part of me wanted to hear him out, wanted to believe he had changed, that he had realized what he did. But another part, the part that had learned to protect itself, knew better. Tell him no, that I don't want to see him, that I don't want to talk to him, that he should get on with his life. And I'll get on with mine. Are you sure? Completely. I hung up the phone, and I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. In June, the first year of my new life, I decided to do something I always wanted to do but never dared. I painted my house, not white, yellow, a bright sunny yellow. Manny helped me. We worked for 2 weeks. When we finished, the house looked completely different, cheerful, alive, like I felt inside. The neighbors started to comment, some with admiration, others with criticism. But I didn't care. It was my house, my life, my decision. I also fixed up the garden. I planted flowers, red roses, white daisies, yellow sunflowers. Every morning I watered them. I watched them grow, and I felt that I was growing too. One afternoon in July, while I was in the garden, I saw a car stop in front of my house. My heart sped up, but it wasn't Stephen. It was a young woman, about 25. She got out of the car and walked toward me. "Helen Mendez?" "Yes, my name is Carmen Wallace. I'm Mr. Wallace's niece. He told me your story. I'm a journalist, and I'd like to write about you, about what you lived through, about how you won. I'm not anyone important. That's not true. You're someone who fought when many would have given up, someone who defended herself when everyone expected her to surrender. Your story can help other women, other mothers who are going through the same thing." I thought about it. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to be the center of attention, but if my story could help someone, it was worth it. "All right, but tell it like it is. No embellishments, no lies, just the truth, just the truth." Carmen came several times over the next few weeks. She interviewed me, took photographs. She spoke with Manny, with Joanne, with Mr. Wallace. And in September, the article was published in the local newspaper. The headline was, "The Woman Who Wouldn't Give Up." It told my story from the beginning. The phone call, the betrayal, the legal battle, the victory. Everything. The day it was published, I received dozens of calls. Women thanking me, telling me they were also going through something similar, that my story had given them hope, that it had given them the strength to fight. I wasn't a hero. I was just a woman who had defended what was hers. But if that inspired someone else, then all the pain had been worth it. Today is October. 1 year since I overheard that call. 1 year since my life fell apart and I had to rebuild it. I still live in my yellow house. I still drive my white car. I still water my flowers. Stephen never came back. I heard he moved to another city, that he started over. I don't know if he learned anything. I don't know if he'll ever understand what he did to me. But it's not my problem anymore. I let go of that burden. Manny is still my family. Joanne too, and all the women who write to me, thanking me. They're my family now too. At 71, I learned something I should have learned a long time ago. That it doesn't matter how old you are. That it doesn't matter how many times you fall. You can always get up. You can always fight. You can always choose your own life. I chose mine. And I don't regret it. If you're going through something similar, if someone is trying to take what's yours, if you feel like you can't go on, listen to me. Yes, you can. You are stronger than you think. Get help. Fight. Don't give up. Because your life is yours. And no one has the right to take it from you. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. If this helped you in any way, leave me a comment. Share this story with someone who needs it. And remember, it's never too late to start over. Never.